Portland City Council on September 7th. And for those of you listening in the Petty Grove and Lovejoy room, if for any reason the audio or the video does not work, please send somebody immediately to the council chamber and we'll resolve that expeditiously, but we won't go on without you. I promise that. Could you please call the roll, Carla?
Udaly?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. There is a statement of decorum we read at the beginning of each council session. I'd like to abridge it today if I could. Lots of people are going to testify. They may or may not have the same opinion as you do, but everybody has a right to be heard, to feel safe, and to feel respected in this chamber. So when people are testifying or when the council is deliberating, we ask that people not interrupt. If you do interrupt, that is a violation of council rules. You'll be asked not to do so. If you continue to be interrupting, you'll be asked to leave. And if you're asked to leave and you do not leave, you're subject to arrest for trespass. Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen and everybody feels respected and heard. If you are a lobbyist, you must state so as part of council rules. If you're here representing an organization, that is also helpful. If you'd like to sign up to testify, there are sign-up sheets either in the chamber with the council clerk. There are also sign-up sheets outside the council chamber. You'll have plenty of time to do that. When you testify, could you please state your name for the record? We don't need your full address. When your time is 30 seconds from being up, you'll see a yellow light come on and it beeps. When your time is up, the red light goes on and you'll hear more beeps. And we ask people to please be to the point as much as possible. Given the very large number of people signed up to testify, I want to be very clear, we may not get to everybody today who would like to testify today, but there will be other opportunities. So my game plan is it's a couple of minutes after 2. We're going to hear some brief staff presentation. We're going to offer up some amendments. I'm going to read a statement from Commissioner Saltzman. We'll then go right to public testimony. Think 2 minutes per person. We ask you not to be repetitive. There are a lot of people here who probably want to speak on the same thing. It's okay just to say, I also support X, or I agree with X. If you want, you can give a thumbs up if you support something. If you don't, you can give a thumbs down, but again, please don't shout out. So with that, I would ask, first of all, for Carla to read the first ordinance and the first 2 resolutions, please.
Item 997, adopt the Central City 2035 plan, amend the comprehensive plan map, transportation system plan, Willamette Greenway plan, Willamette River Greenway inventory, scenic resources protection plan, zoning map and Title 33, and replace prior Central City plans and documents. 998, adopt the Central City 2035 plan action charts, performance targets, and urban design diagrams. And 999, adopt the Central City 2035 plan green loop concept report.
Colleagues, we're here today to talk about the future of Portland's Central City. The Planning and Sustainability Commission has forwarded a recommended draft plan. This plan is the first comprehensive update to the Central City Plan since 1988, the first update to the new 2035 Comprehensive Plan, and our chance to lay the groundwork for a Central City that is even a more vibrant place than it is today. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to influence the look, feel, and function of the place where today 39,000 people live and 123,000 people work on a mere 3% of the city's total land. The future of the Central City is obviously very important. For our economy, more than 50,000 new jobs are coming in the next 2 decades. for our ability to address the housing shortage that's driving up housing costs. 26,000 households live here now. By 2035, this number is expected to more than double. For our supply of affordable housing, it has the highest concentration of affordable housing in the region, and 60% of the city's affordable housing units are located in the central city. This will grow with inclusionary housing and with projects like the redevelopment of the post office site. The 1972 downtown plan sparked the resurgence of downtown as the economic and cultural center of the city. It spurred public and private investment, the Transit Mall, and the Tom McCall Waterfront Park. The 1988 Central City Plan brought the Lloyd District and the Central East Side into the Central City. Its premise was that the success of the Central City as a jobs hub depended upon more residential growth as well. So far, that formula has worked well. The 1988 plan also called for integrating the Willamette River more into the life of our city. We've made progress in this area, but as you've heard me say on many occasions, I believe we can do much more. Today we start the hearing process for the Central City 2035 plan. The City Council has already endorsed many of its policies and proposals through its past work. City Council has given direction on the Central City Concept Plan, policy plans for North, Northeast, West, and Southeast quadrants, and other work on the Willamette River, scenic and natural resources in the inclusionary housing bonus. Over 8,000 Portlanders so far have participated in this process. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Sally Edmonds, who will walk us through the agenda of today's hearing. Sally, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you very much. Sally Edmonds with Planning and Sustainability. Good afternoon. We are very pleased to be here today for the first hearings on the Central City Plan. As you know, the Central City Plan contains many volumes, and here is the long list of those volumes. The record for this plan is over behind the city attorney. There are about 22 boxes, and that record is in the room.
Half price right now.
So I thought what I'd do is start out is just to go over the overall schedule with you.
Thank you.
So we're here today for two public hearings, one on the main components of the plan, one on the post office early implementation. I'll go through that a little bit later. And then on September 14th, we have two more hearings, one on the new Chinatown, Japantown historic guidelines, and one on the scenic and environmental overlay zones outside of the central city that relate to this. Then we have four council sessions scheduled: September 28th, October 18th, November 2nd, and December 6th. And those are to work through any amendments you might have on the Central City Plan that you'll be hearing about through these hearings today and next week.
And Sally, for those who don't get the opportunity to testify today, assuming we run out of time, when will they be able to testify next?
They will testify on September 14th, so
Very
we
good,
will
thank
just roll these over
Okay, and they can,
into-
of course, come to one of the later sessions as well. Is that correct?
They can certainly come to the later sessions.
Okay, but it's
We-
our expectation we'll get through it on September 14th, if not today.
That's right, that's right. We have another hearing scheduled for January 18th, 2018, and our intention for that hearing is to have that be on any amendments that council would wish to bring forward. So you can discuss them at the four sessions in the fall. We will package them all up, and so you can have a hearing on all of those on January 18th. We will then, we may need to schedule another session to work through any other comments on those, but we would go for a council vote likely sometime in March. We can't go before March because The vote needs to follow the effective date of the comprehensive plan. That plan is still in the hands of the state, and we expect them to issue a decision and the plan to be effective, the comprehensive plan to be effective by March. So we would follow the effective date with a vote on the Central City Plan, because this is the first update to the comprehensive plan. Okay, so then, so today, as Carla read, we have a hearing on the bulk of the plan, the main ordinance that she listed, and then a couple of resolutions. And these items will be adopted as amendments to the new comprehensive plan once that is in effect. And again, that would be in March. And we are currently expecting council discussion of any potential amendments on the things we hear today at 2 o'clock at 2 p.m. on October 18th. It's currently scheduled. So then at 4:30 today, we'll hear testimony on early implementation of some things for the post office. And that ordinance would be adopted as amendment to the existing comprehensive plan. And so council discussion of amendments or a second reading and vote on that would take place on September 28th, starting at 3 p.m. And that ordinance could then go into effect 30 days later.
Very good. And
So-
if there are people who are not taking copious notes and want to review what you have just said in terms of dates, times, and place, where do they go to get that information?
So one of the things that we could do is we could post this PowerPoint online. And they can certainly, we'll put out an e-news with more information on this.
Perfect, thank you.
So just moving on to then September 14th, we have 2 more hearings. And again, at the top of the slide, it says that if testimony from September 7th hearings is not complete, it will be heard first on 9/14. So the third hearing, sorry, go back. So the third hearing will be on the new Chinatown, Japantown Historic Design Guidelines. That ordinance will also be adopted as an amendment to the existing comprehensive plan, and that will come back to you on September 28th also for any potential amendments or second reading. And then that would be in effect 30 days later because it's the existing comprehensive plan. Finally, the fourth hearing on September 14th is on some amendments to the environmental and scenic overlay zones outside of the central city. And that would be adopted as an amendment to the new comprehensive plan. So again, it goes with the larger package in March. So that's kind of the rundown of the next couple of days of hearings. So Mayor, back to today. The next step, I think that's the end of the slides on that. Thank you, Nicholas. The next step would be the amendments, your amendments and any other amendments that council members may want to introduce. We have invited testimony here from 4 individuals from the Planning and Sustainability Commission, the Design Commission, the Landmarks Commission, and the Forestry Commission. And then if there's other testimony from elected officials or others, and then moving on to the general testimony.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Very good. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Before we open the hearing, there's some amendments that I propose we put on the table now so the public can address them in testimony if they so desire. The amendments I'm introducing are minor text cleanups and clarifying language in the code. These include things such as how to measure the top of bank and simplification of the shadow study requirements. They were provided to City Council and made available to the public last week. There's 2 amendments in these packages that I would like to highlight. First, I'd like to offer up for discussion purposes the proposed view corridor of Mount Hood from Salmon Springs Fountain in Waterfront Park. Here's a couple of reasons why I think we should put this on the table. Salmon Springs and Governor Tom McCall Waterfront Park is a special place. It draws thousands of visitors every year. Today, there is a view from Salmon Springs of Mount Hood, and it seems to be something of a signature view in our city. But there's also an important trade-off with preserving the view corridor. Protecting this view reduces height in a corridor that crosses directly through the central east side. There are impacts to the development potential of the properties that we should be considering. However, of the 5 potential views that exist from Waterfront Park, this probably has one of the least impacts. I know that this was a particularly difficult decision for the folks on the Planning and Sustainability Commission. I'm inclined to accept the recommendation of the Planning and Sustainability Commission, but I still want to hear from property owners, the public, and my colleagues on this important matter before we as a council make a final decision. I've also included an amendment that extends the view corridor for the Japanese garden in Washington Park. As we saw at a work session a couple of weeks ago, the view from the Japanese Park Pavilion to Mount Hood is iconic and it is important, but the trees on the hillside are also growing and they're starting to block the view. Trimming the trees and potentially selectively removing a few may be necessary to preserve that view. I'd like to hear the public's thoughts on that. Commissioner Fritz, I understand you also have.
Mayor?
Commissioner Fish.
So I'll second what we'll call Wheeler 1, which is a package of amendments.
Very good. There's more to Wheeler 1, and that is Commissioner Fritz's addition to this particular package. Commissioner Fritz?
Well, this is on a different topic.
That's fine. So we have a motion then. Can I get a second for the package? We'll call that the package amendment. It's dated August 29th as part of the Central City 2035 so that the public can testify. We now have that on the record. People are able to testify when it comes up. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. I'll have some more amendments next week. There's still a few things that Portland Parks and Recreation are working out with the Portland Planning Bureau and Sustainability. But the one is my particular concern is to maintain the base height of 75 feet and remove the proposed bonus height increase of up to 250 feet for parcels at the Morrison Bridgehead on the west side of the Willamette River. This was a decision made by the council last year, which I'd like the new council to look into. My main concern is the step down to the river, that allowing 250 feet right where everything around it is only 75 feet, and the house, I mean not the house, the building behind is relatively new and is less than 250 feet, is not maintaining the step down to the river, which is required in the comprehensive plan. It would also, to keep the same as the rest of that strip, would be better urban form. And it would be more supportive, I believe, of the policy CE2, which calls for improving access to and from the Central East Side Industrial District. One of the main reasons that the rest of the council wanted to upzone those parcels was for redevelopment, and that could include changing the on and off ramps for the Morrison Bridge, which is not necessarily something that we want to incentive, in my opinion.
We have a motion. I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Thank you.
Any others, colleagues?
I have a couple.
Commissioner Udaly.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to propose an amendment to our green roof amendment, raising the required area to be covered from 60% to 100%. We've consulted with BPS and Portland's Green Roof Information Think Tank. There's some persuasive arguments for increasing that number, and I'm very interested to hear from the community on that.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And
That's
then
your
the
daily one.
second one, I'm proposing a zoning code amendment for the properties upland of the dock on the north end of the central city. The subject properties are upland of the best unused dock on the Willamette River in the central city. And in order to use the dock to activate the river, we would need to rezone that area to allow commercial activity.
Mayor, I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Fish. Commissioner Fritz, did you
I
have
was
a
just
question?
wondering, I'm not clear on where the location is and what's the current zoning or the proposed zoning in the
So
plan.
current zoning is residential. It's almost the entire river is sorry, it's right here. I guess, Carla, I'll need to enter this into the record. So it's near Terminal 1, and it's my understanding that there's no actual lots still available for development, so we're not trying to change the residential area to a commercial area. We're trying to provide commercial access to that dock, which cannot be achieved without changing the zoning.
Thank you for the clarification.
Your microphone, is it on?
Not on? I'm not close enough. Do you have a description, is there a tax ID number for the property or some on the documents you have? Otherwise, we can,
I have a map, but I do not have the tax ID number.
or an address, no? Okay.
It is north of the Fremont Bridge. It's east of Sherlock Street. Do you, okay. Jamie will track it down for you.
Very good, and that was already seconded. Any further amendments, colleagues?
Me.
At this point, I'd like to read a statement from Commissioner Saltzman. He is our Transportation Commissioner. He could not be here today, and so he asked me if I would read the following. A quick announcement. Unfortunately, Commissioner Saltzman is out ill today and as Portland's current Transportation Commissioner. He asked me to make some brief comments this afternoon. As we know, many of you are here due to transportation items in our draft Central City Plan, and specifically the Oregon Department of Transportation's I-5 Rose Quarter project. Many of you have already seen Commissioner Saltzman's listed expectations regarding the project, and he's provided copies of those here, and they're also up on his website. I too have seen them and wholeheartedly support them as Portland's mayor. We must implement the one and only proven method for combating traffic congestion, value pricing, sooner rather than later. We must build the complete project as outlined in the North-Northeast Quadrant Plan. We must ensure that funding for this project does not decrease resources for other important citywide objectives, and we must respect the long history of this area and work to counter continued gentrification of the neighborhoods around this area. Thanks again for all of you who plan to testify regarding this project's inclusion in the Central City Plan, but also do know that Commissioner Saltzman plans to bring a resolution to Council specific to this project and the expectations both of us have expressed regarding it. We would encourage you to make your voices heard at the time as well, and in the coming weeks, Commissioner Saltzman's office will announce when that resolution will be scheduled for a council hearing. And there is a letter in very fine print here, and I believe copies are available of this letter here or somewhere close by here. They're certainly available on Commissioner Saltzman's web page. Now, I'd like, as Sally had indicated before, to invite some of our citizen commissioners to come up to the table. Andre Baugh from the Planning and Sustainability Commission, Julie Livingston, who is a design commissioner, Kristen Miner, who is a landmarks commissioner, and Tui Tu, who is a forestry commissioner. Come on up. Greetings. And I don't know if we have, are there two commissioners in the building? They may be in another room, but if they show up, great.
May I?
Yeah, please. Good afternoon.
Good
Thanks for being here.
afternoon. Nice to see you. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Tui Tu. I'm the member of the Urban Forestry Commission. On behalf of Mayor Rechik, the Policy Committee Chair who could not be here today due to Irma, I'll be presenting comments and thoughts from the combined efforts of the Policy Committee. As a caveat, content material from this letter has not yet been voted on by the full commission. This letter will be presented in the September 21st Urban Forestry Commission meeting, in which the full commission will vote and a written testimony will be submitted at that time. Please accept the following testimony. The Central City 2035 plan is an impressive document with aspirational goals, innovative designs, and strategic thinking. We look forward to continuing to work with the staff and others to adapt and implement all relative policies that pertain to trees in future developments, parks, plazas, and other spaces identified in the Central City Plan, as well as those related to the neighborhood master plans. Two important factors I'd like to point out as we move forward with the Central City Plan. Number one, human health, human well-being, and number two, environmental health, which will require intentional planning to ensure that new urban development benefit people and nature. We encourage intentional and innovative street design to accommodate trees. Please consider the following 8 comments as you prepare to advance the next version of the plan. Number one, the plan notes that there will likely be code revisions, policy changes, and new investments in tree planting, preservations, and maintenance that will affect the 2 different tree target scenarios, which is highlighted in the technical memo. We request that the urban forestry be informed in a timely manner regarding these targets, implementation practices, and methodology used to track and evaluate progress. Number 2, given the priority and extent to which the new comprehensive plan calls for green infrastructure and trees for human and public health reasons, City Council should act immediately to remove all Title XI exemptions from commercial and industrial lands. Number 3, trees are often the last element of consideration during the design and development process. The city has an opportunity to change this pattern by ensuring that green infrastructure is brought into the intentional hierarchy process under the flexible street design. Number 4, the goal for requiring adequate subsurface soil volumes for trees in conjunction with development and infrastructure projects is very important. However, it is not obvious how this requirement will be implemented. The plan offers guidance, but the policy needs strengthening along with code provisions to implement it. Number 5, the plan distinguishes between different street character sites and requires landscaping if building setbacks are selected by applicants. However, the building setbacks will allow in some instances, but appear to be generally discouraged. The plan should strongly encourage, in more instances, require landscaped building setbacks along sections of the green loop and flexible streets. I'm almost done. Number 6, we support the new Central City Master Plan requirements as it will offer good opportunities to enhance canopy and associated livability benefits on larger city sites. Pertaining to this section, we recommend the following. A, adding an approval criterion that focuses on inclusion of open area and incorporation of green infrastructure, specifically trees. This is needed to meet the big goals defined in the comprehensive plan and provide a base for related tree requirements in this section. 6B, increase the tree density requirements for medium and large trees from 1 tree per 3,000 square foot to 1 tree per 2,000 square foot. This is more appropriate for the tree size and area ratio, especially given the limited amount of open air required in these sites. Number 7, existing and new parks, plazas, and other open spaces present excellent opportunities to plant a diversity of species and grow the next generation of heritage trees. The city should take full advantage of spaces below and above ground and implement innovative designs that offer sufficient space for large trees. Number 8, we strongly support the expansion of the greenway setback on the Willamette River from 25 feet to 50 feet in the recommended draft city central. This expansion is critical to improving the ecological function of the greenway while working towards multiple tree goals for the city, increasing overall tree canopy, planting more large form native trees, improving air quality, and reducing urban heat island effect in the central city. The city plan set forth a vision that will impact future generations. Tree planted today will take generations for human health efforts to be realized. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, my name is Kristen Miner. I'm the Vice Chair of the Landmarks Commission. Thank you so much for allowing us to have invited testimony.
Thanks for being here.
The Landmarks Commission has several issues or concerns with Central City 510 chapter recommended draft. I'm going to jump into those just as a matter of time, although we really appreciate all the work that has gone into this and support much of it. The first thing I'd like to talk about for a moment is historic districts. That's where our work differs quite a bit from that of the Design Commission. When we review new buildings in historic districts, we have to take into account the cohesiveness of the entire district. And a district really is a single historic resource. Because of that, we are seeking several amendments that would help us reduce conflicts. And when an applicant comes to us, for instance, with FAR or bulk that can be transferred into a historic district, that may not create a compatible form. So one of the amendments that we are asking for is that 510-200D1 strikes the clause transferred to a site except that FAR transfers into historic districts is not permitted. The other issue regarding heights in historic districts. Heights is a very complicated issue. We certainly recognize that. And height in a historic district really creates what in architecture school I learned as a palimpsest. In other words, one of those wonderful places in a great city where you can recognize the disparities in scale between new and old, that there are traces of something that used to be, and then next to it, perhaps, say along the edge of the historic district, is where wonderful new buildings highlight those differences and make us aware.
Can I just take a moment to acknowledge that's the first time in my 9 years that anyone has used that word at council? I don't want to, you went to architecture school, so you had a slightly different definition. I remember it as the title of Gore Vidal's memoir. Different school, different time,
Very
but
nice.
okay. Anyway,
Very nice.
Thank you for using an interesting word.
You're so welcome. In recognition of the difficulty of where we've arrived, I think the Landmarks Commission is prepared to accept the heights in the maps as proposed, with the recognition that they are not always compatible. However, in order to reduce the conflicts of applicants coming in front of us, we ask for some simple notes to the height and FAR maps, that those maximum heights and FARs are subject to land use approval. We also, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we definitely support the way that ground floor window standards work currently with modification standards, generally offering applicants good solutions. And we generally find that those work for applicants. And so I know that there are some amendments that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability have offered. You'll be hearing about those, and we got a chance to read them just prior to coming in here, but generally we support those. We do propose striking the clause relating to allowing 5 feet of landscaping at parking structures, however.
And why is that?
Because allowing landscaping in place of a more urban solution seems like a step backwards. It's a very suburban kind of solution in general. So I would like to just leave you with the words from our own comprehensive plan policy 4.49, resolution of conflicts in historic districts. And it reads in part, refine base zoning in historic districts to take into account the character of the historic resources in the district. So we ask for your help in achieving that. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Very much.
Thanks, Julie.
So good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners Daly. Fritz, and Fish. My name is Julie Livingston. I'm the chair of the Portland Design Commission. And you should have in front of you a letter from the Design Commission on Design
Got it.
Commission letterhead. The commission is asking for 6 amendments to the current draft of Central City 2035. The staff at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability have been incredibly receptive to feedback that we've provided throughout the process. These are issues that the Design Commission thinks remain outstanding. 3 of these are related to ground floor window standards. My understanding is that staff has been doing some work to revise language around ground floor window standards, and so they may not all be applicable still. So with that in mind, our first and kind of most important issue is minimum floor area ratios within the central city. Thankfully, there are minimum floor area ratios now proposed in the central city. They vary on a scale of 1-to-1 and 3-to-1. This is new with Central City 2035, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. The commission, though, feels that these fairly low minimum FARs don't go quite far enough. We would like to see the minimum FARs represent a more significant percentage of the maximum FAR on any site. We believe that this better achieves the goals of density that Central City 2035 would want to achieve. And we also believe that this revision would be compatible with several of our most important Central City fundamental design guidelines. A2, emphasize Portland themes. A5, enhance, embellish, and identify areas. C3, respect architectural integrity. And C4, complement the context of existing buildings. So that is our first request, that minimum FARs be increased.
Do you have a specific number?
You know, we've had much discussion in the hearings room whether it should be half of the maximum FAR up to 75 or 80% of the maximum FAR. That might be high. We do think that it should be something that's higher than what is typically allowed in the mixed-use zones. The 1-to-1, 3-to-1 is common in the mixed-use zones. So second issue aligns with Kristen's testimony on limits on increased floor area and the no limit applied to FAR that can be transferred to a site. So the Design Commission does not review buildings in historic districts, but the same guidelines apply to those buildings that apply to the buildings that we review, and we do have a strong opinion on this. Maximum heights have been reduced in 2 historic districts, but it is our belief that those maximum heights are not consistent with the types of historic construction in those districts. The type of construction kind of limits the height, the bulk, the scale of buildings. And having heights that are significantly taller than the existing fabric will really significantly impact the character of those neighborhoods. So we would request that the unlimited transfers into historic districts be eliminated or reduced to a scale that the Landmarks Commission finds to be compatible with the character of each district. We also have made note that required ground floor retail sales and service uses in the South Waterfront subdistrict have been eliminated. This section of the code required ground floor commercial activity at 3 waterfront locations and 6 intersections in South Waterfront. We understand that ground floor commercial activity is currently a little bit of a hard sell in some locations in South Waterfront, but that's the South Waterfront of 2017. And South Waterfront of 2035 is likely to be a much more vibrant place with that type of retail activity at those intersections, which have not yet been built out, and at some specific locations at the waterfront. With respect to ground floor windows, I will touch on bike parking. I think that bike parking is something that we talk about all the time in the hearings room. It's important to the city, it's important to the Design Commission, it's important to every single person that rides a bike. We want there to be plenty of bike parking. We want it to be easily accessible. What we don't want is for it to cause dead space on our streets. And when bike parking uses that are adjacent to the exterior wall of a building are limited to storage space, it's not very active space, and we want to have active streets. So bike use areas that support shop space for people to do bicycle repairs, that support bike wash stations. The commission has seen these regularly recently in both commercial construction, commercial buildings and multifamily buildings. And so we are fully in support of active bike use spaces at our ground floors, and would hope to see a revision to that code language so that we don't end up with potentially quite a bit of just plain bike storage space at our streets. And finally, the ground floor window standards that are applicable to street-facing facades closer than 20 feet to a street lot line. And also walls of parking structures that are exempted from ground floor window standards if the facade is set back at least 5 feet and landscaped to the L2 standard. We believe that these revisions represent a rollback, a pretty significant rollback to ground floor window standards in the Central City. They are contrary to Central City fundamental design guidelines, and we would like to see all buildings be subjected to ground floor window standards so that we can have conversations about what's appropriate or inappropriate in the hearings room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate you.
Good afternoon. Andre Baugh, Vice Chair, Planning Sustainability Commission. I'm here to summarize Catherine Schultz's letter from the PSC to you earlier. The Planning Commission is pleased to forward the draft Central City 2035 plan for your consideration. As you know, this is the first update since 1998 and our chance to lay the groundwork for the Central City for the next 20 years. It will also be the first amendment to the newly adopted comprehensive plan. This plan represents years of work and public input, starting with the concept plan, quadrant plans, and a variety of studies. The PSC has received more than 750 comments prior to and at public hearings. We considered amendments based on testimony, worked through several challenging issues before voting and recommending this package to you. I'm going to highlight some of the issues that we found in this plan. The plan includes a fully revised bonus and transfer system to support affordable housing, height and FAR increases in transit-rich districts, height decreases to protect iconic scenic views and integrity of our historic districts. Mary, you had brought that up. Regulations to allow more next-generation industrial businesses, ground floor use improvements to support active and livable streets, a new environmental zone to help protect natural resources along the river, new green building requirements, and new transportation projects to make it easier to walk, bike, and use transit in the Central City. The highlights I just mentioned align with the Portland Plan, the Comprehensive Plan, and the Climate Action Plan goals and policies. So this is really bringing all those to bear and implementing them. I'm going to take a couple of minutes here now to highlight a few of the issues the PSC found challenging, and I'm sure you'll find challenging too. The first was protecting scenic views. As the mayor mentioned, he wants to look at that iconic view from Salmon Springs. That was a topic that we struggled with also. We received testimony that protecting the views of Mount Hood are important because of the iconic nature and kind of the postcard of Portland. We also received testimony that against protecting the view because of the negative impact on development in Central City. And Central City is one of the hottest growing neighborhoods that we have for jobs. During the recession, it grew. So there was, that tension there. We voted 7-4 not to support protecting the view of Mount Hood from Salmon Springs, but we looked at other views and like limiting heights from the view from the Tillicum Crossing and other public views to protect that Mount Hood view. So there was some balancing there of protected views. The PSC also voted to limit heights in historic districts. Height limits in some historic districts predate the creation of the districts and do not align the character of older structures in these districts. Again, we deliberated on how best to balance historic preservation objectives with existing development allowances. Ultimately, we decided to bring regulation into greater alignment with the objectives of the historic district designation and design protections applied to the Historic Landmarks Commission. and you've heard about that already. Another significant item is the I-5 Broadway-Weiler Transportation System Plan, TSP project. This project includes adding an auxiliary lane on I-5 to improve safety and reduce congestion. It also would make changes to overpasses to support active transportation and a future pedestrian and bicycle bridge. We discussed this in depth and voted 6-4 to retain the project because of its important freeway safety, local street, and active transportation benefits. But I want to make clear, it was not an open check. It was clarified and really quantified to say it's contingent on the inclusion of the bike and pedestrian connections, the development of an equity strategy to address the impacts to the African American community, inclusion of low-income housing solutions, and encouragement of ODOT, PBOT to evaluate congestion pricing and transportation demand management options, among other things. This project has the opportunity to bring and connect the historic African American community that was destroyed 60-plus years ago back. It also has an opportunity to, it's a downtown project, but it has an opportunity to help East Portland if you equitably invest in East Portland like you would downtown. I believe, and these are my personal feelings, but I think 6 of the people believe, because of these items, that we can do both. Equity is not about a trade-off, it's about doing both. And we can bring and do things for the African American community that was destroyed by a freeway a long time ago. We can bring prosperity, housing, and a lot of other things in an equitable way, and we can invest in East Portland in a very equitable way that makes them feel as part of Portland as they would downtown in this shiny penny investment. Finally, the PSC supported some green building measures that are in the plan. We recognize the significant public and benefits that these measures provide and how they will align with the comp plan and the climate action plan goals and policies. But we're also sensitive to the increased costs, including them in new construction. However, we asked for and we got results of a feasibility analysis showed that the costs were nominal. So yes, there are costs, but they're not significant so we went ahead and approved them. The PSC deliberations were informed and thoughtful. And one of the underlying things that I think when you read the comp plan and look at many of the items in the comp plan, the Central City plan, is this idea that because it's downtown, you need to do something comparable in many instances in East Portland. So you're going to build a green loop. There's language that talks about what's the comparable in East Portland. You're going to do I-5, Broadway, what's the comparable investment in East Portland? So it's not, this plan is focused on downtown, its prosperity, its growth. But I believe we are transmitting to you the idea that when you do this, don't forget East Portland, make the investments, make the equitable investments in East Portland, and keep equity, which is part of the Portland plan this council approved, the comp plan, its policies, and these policies of the Central City 2035 in mind when you do this, because if you don't, it will be a downtown plan, and it should be a Portland plan for all the residents, and so keep that in mind. I want to thank the staff and their hard work. We asked a lot of staff to respond in addressing questions, concerns, and the citizens that were raised by citizens to get to answers to make our decisions. They did a wonderful job. I think they just did great. I want to thank Catherine Schultz for being the chair, leading this through. We've come a long way since 1988. It charts a new course for a prosperous, healthy, equitable, and resilient urban core in the years to come, and I think a greater Portland, too. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all for your testimony. We appreciate it. Thanks for your service on our commissions.
Thank you.
Do we have any other elected officials or commissioners who'd like to come up first to testify? Very good. So here's what we're going to do.
This is the commissioner right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up, please.
We have two.
Come on up. Oh, it went?
Captions.
The captions are not working, so we'll wait until they are.
Thanks, Phil. And if there's folks with small children or people with disabilities who'd also like to go first, we'll certainly accommodate you. Please just let Carla know. So just as a reminder, there will be about 2 minutes to testify, and we'll take as many people as we can between now and 4:30, and I'll repeat this in a minute. And if you'd prefer not to come back, if you're not called today, we'll obviously take written testimony, and that testimony will be available until 5 p.m. on September 15th. Still no? So how are the Ducks looking this year?
Was the game canceled this week? It's still going forth? As far as I know. Oh, shit.
So this is a cell phone-based system, is that the deal?
It's getting.
Yeah, it is. We should start looking for an alternative.
Well, and it's required, it's a legally required function. What if all of a sudden the lights doesn't go on? Or the air didn't circulate?
For those of you who may just be tuning in, we're waiting for our closed captioning system to come back online. It's a legal requirement that we provide it, and many people require it in order to be able to understand what we're saying. It's back up? All right, good. So we're back in business. We'll take as much testimony as we can between now and 4:30. For those of you who don't get called today, you can come back again if you'd like to testify in person to one of the later hearings. Alternatively, if it's easier, you can just submit testimony by email. You have until 5 p.m. on September 15th to do that. 2 minutes each, name for the record. After Chris gets his chance to testify, and in a minute, Carla will call the first names.
Mayor,
Yes,
if I could just, I want to give that tax ID number for the record.
Oh, good.
And this is in regards to the proposed zoning code amendment. It's R637100010. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'm Chris Smith, and I am Vice Chair of the Planning and Sustainability Commission. But I am required by city code to tell you that I'm also a registered lobbyist and authorized spokesperson for an organization that we're flying under the banner of No More Freeway Expansions. That's a group we formed in the last few weeks to highlight this issue for you, and I'm going to focus my remarks on that. You're going to hear the phrase this afternoon, I think, quite a few times, that urban freeway expansion has never solved congestion. And we believe that the I-5 Rose Quarter project in the Central City Plan. The largest single public investment in the 20 years contemplated in the Central City Plan is ill-advised. You have a packet in front of you that has 24 comp plan policies that I believe that this contradicts. I won't go through every single one of the 24, but I will highlight some of the major ones. The first, and appropriately the first goal in the comp plan around transportation is safety. And this is the encapsulation of our Vision Zero policy, and it says that we need to have laser-like focus on traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries. This is the map from our Vision Zero work. And the thing, and at this scale, it's not really very useful, I'm sorry, but what I do want to highlight is that the freeway corridor is not a high crash corridor. One of the motivations touted for this project is safety, but in fact, the crashes that happen on the freeway are typically rear end and sideswipe collisions that result in property damage or minor injuries. Vision Zero demands that we focus on fatalities and serious injuries. We had 44 fatalities in the city last year in 2016, and sadly, we're on track to have the same number roughly this year. This investment is not addressing those. Many of those fatalities happen on ODOT facilities elsewhere in the city, places like 82nd and Outer Powell, and we believe that ODOT should be spending their money in those places. Being environmentally sustainable and hitting carbon targets is another important part of our transportation policy. This contradicts those goals both for greenhouse gases and for air toxins. We believe that's a serious conflict.
Chris, you're a commissioner, so please go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Goal 9E asks us to focus on equity. I read in the Tribune this morning that the city's incremental revenue from the transportation bill will be about $30 million a year, and highlights that that's not sufficient to deal with our transportation investment gaps. The legislature has authorized $30 million a year for this project alone. So we have an investment equal to the rest of the money that Portland will see from the transportation bill focused on one area when we know that our most deficient areas are in East Portland. So I would argue that this does not meet the equity hurdle because it's investing money not where it's needed most. And I will skip ahead a bit in the interest of time. We have a very strong modal policy statement in the comprehensive plan that says we should be prioritizing walking, cycling, and transit. But in fact, this project puts a huge amount of dollars, $450 million, on the last priority in the system, which is single occupancy vehicles, which are the primary users of this stretch of freeway. The comp plan does address the question of congestion and basically focuses in on congestion pricing as the solution to that, not adding capacity. So while we appreciate Commissioner Saltzman's statement insisting on congestion pricing, we believe it's irresponsible to design a project until you know what effect congestion pricing has had. We believe that once pricing is implemented, you won't need a construction project. And a very important but very wonky issue is the mixed modal, the multimodal mixed use area, the so-called MMA. And that is something that the comp plan calls for. It's basically the idea that ODOT shouldn't be involved in land use planning in the central city. They have that purview because we want to make sure that land use planning doesn't disrupt state transportation facilities. But I think, and there's sort of a deal here that ODOT said, well, if you do this project, we'll give you the MMA designation. I think that's a terrible deal for Portland. I think the MMA designation is supported, in fact, by this central city plan that does so much to meet the city's and the state's needs and has very good land use planning. That alone is justification for why we have earned the MMA status, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to be boxed into a deal where we trade something that contradicts our policies to get that. So I'm going to skip ahead here. I want to hit a couple of key ones. Commissioner Fish, I want to highlight for you the impervious surfaces policy. This project would represent almost 2 new lane miles plus shoulders of impervious surface. Somehow the stormwater from that's going to have to be captured and treated. I don't know if we can do it in bioswales on a freeway, but somebody has to figure that out. And I will close with climate because that is In this week, when Houston's underwater and Oregon is burning, I don't think any of us can deny that climate change is a critical priority, and our investments, all our investments, must move our climate goals. Making a $500 million investment that sends climate in the wrong direction is simply unsupportable in the current environment. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Thanks, Chris, for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Carla?
Sorry. For the first people for disabilities are children, are people with small children. I have Heidi Moore and Susan Lindsay and Philip Wolf. Oh, sorry, we've lost captioning.
Is the captioning off again?
It's back right now.
Okay, thank you.
I guess nobody's starting, I will.
Jump right in.
Hi, I'm
Thank
Susan
you.
Lindsay, and, well, I think it's very interesting, the conversation I was listening to about the view corridors, because I'm here to talk specifically kind of about the same thing in a different perspective. And that is, I'd like to request a kind of a revisit on the allowable heights on Southeast 12th and 11th, looking west, because many of us who have lived for a long time in the inner southeast actually enjoy the view of the Portland Hills. And the new plan will allow for a 125-foot hard limit. Right now, there's a 50-foot there with, I'm talking about from Southeast Morrison north to Burnside Street. So if we could just sort of, I don't want to take up a lot of time here, but it is a concern. And unfortunately, it was one I've had a kind of an ongoing family tragedy this summer, and I wasn't able to kind of deal with it as much behind the scenes, and I thought I'd wait till council, but we're very concerned about it. We're talking, 10 or 11 stories right there across from a single story or a historic neighborhood on the other side of 12th. So I'd like to revisit that height if we could. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for being here. Susan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Heidi Moore. I'm a vice president at AltSource, a locally owned and operated custom software development company. We provide development, production, and testing of computer software to other businesses. We are currently rehabilitating a building located 1120 Southeast Madison to use as our future headquarters. Our attorney has submitted a letter into the record, and I will not restate those comments here, but wanted to offer some additional comments on the issue from our perspective. AltSource started in 2004 from our basement in Northeast Portland, and we've continued to double its staff size every year, and we're on track to double again. We currently employ over 90 full-time employees spread across 3 different buildings in the Central East Side District. The ability to expand our operations at the future AltSource headquarters is vital to the continued growth of this company, as the inner Southeast location is a key factor in recruitment and retainment of highly talented and highly compensated high-tech workforce. Additional height restrictions may force us to restart a search for a long-term home for AltSource elsewhere, most likely outside of the city of Portland, rather than expend additional money on improvements that will only serve the company's short-term goals. For these reasons, we strongly support the Planning and Sustainability Commission recommendations.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Philip.
$450 million. For what? Take the power. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip.
Carla, since the minutes, the captioning was not captured this, is there a way to save that document to make sure, okay, before
I
it
will.
gets deleted?
Thank you, Lauren. Okay. And if that's all, that's all I had noted, so we'll go to the regular list. The first three are number 1, 4, and 5, Terry Dublinsky Milton, Angus Duncan, and Joe Courtwright. And they will be followed by 6, 7, and 8, Aaron Brown, Stephen Siegel, and Charlie Tissot.
All right, very good, folks. And 2 minutes will go quickly. Thank you. It will.
Handouts.
Go ahead, Terry.
Should I go ahead and start? Okay. I'm Terry Dublinsky Milton. I'm testifying for myself. I am supportive of the Central City Plan. I would like to offer a couple amendments. First of all, the Gibbs Street overpass ends in a dead-end 3-story elevator. It is not good for large numbers of bicycles. It can be clipped off and then an extension like a Copenhagen snake to connect to the west side waterfront path to handle higher levels. And if we got really creative and wanted to open the Ross Island Bridge, we could carry it over the river, but I know that's aspirational. I'm highly, highly supportive of the Green Loop, but we have to, with the Green Loop, connect to the outer neighborhoods and have extensive, high-quality access all the way out to I-205. Now, the Rose Quarter expansion. I am in support of it, but because of several amendments, one particular one I think is important. I agree with Saltzman. You're going to hear a lot about congestion pricing. It's important, but I think we need to take this into account, preparing for the big one, seismic upgrade. Okay, when the Cascadia subduction zone snaps, 405 is going to be collapsed, all the overpasses are going to be gone, and the Marquam is probably going to be standing in midair. So if you look at the map, what we need to do, in my opinion, is do a study of moving I-5 over to 405 and then removing the East Bank Freeway. This would allow for a redesign of all the interchanges to getting to Lair Hill on the south waterfront. It could create a slip lane from the tunnels to the Ross Island Bridge. You could create a max bypass connecting PSU to Goose Hollow, which would cut 20 minutes off the commute from Clackamas Town Center to Beaverton Transit and no transfer. Call it the Purple Line. And then we could remove the East Bank Freeway completely and open up the river to the east side for the first time in a century. So I would offer you an amendment that you put this study into the Central City Plan as predicated on the Rose Quarter expansion. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Angus Duncan. I'm president of the Bonneville Environmental Foundation here in Portland, and I chair the State of Oregon Global Warming Commission. And while I would like to, I ultimately can't argue that urban planning has to be all about climate and greenhouse gases, but it has to, these have to figure centrally in those kinds of plans and always have in the plans that the city of Portland has adopted. Nationally and in Oregon, we have shifted our electric utilities, our largest sector, onto a course to lower their carbon content in energy solutions. This council participated materially in our efforts to do that, and I think successfully, and the state of Oregon is grateful to you for your intervention. Nationally and in Oregon, though, unfortunately, transportation emissions are up. They've always been the largest sector in Oregon. They are now the largest sector nationally in emissions, and we understand why. It's the end of the recession. People feel flusher. gasoline is less expensive, people can drive more, and the consequence, and they can also drive larger cars, and the consequence is that for every electric vehicle that entered the fleet last year, approximately 80 SUVs, internal combustion SUVs, entered the fleet. VMT in both nationally and in Oregon are up, and there is a modest but disturbing shift from central city growth to suburban growth. So we need to deal with that. Planning needs to address its housing and transportation factors combined. The 2017 transportation bill from Salem, I think, helps us materially with transit, bike, pedestrian solutions, and with electric vehicles. It also addresses congestion, but ambivalently, offering both congestion pricing authority and new freeway lanes. The council and the state of Oregon need to figure out how to deal with those. I just offer one observation from our historical experience in the electrical industry, and that is we have learned the lesson time and time again. Apply demand-side solutions, reducing demand. First, it's much less expensive and much more effective before you go out and build something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Joe Courtwright with No More Freeway Widening. Expanding urban freeways has never solved traffic congestion. That's the one eternal verity of urban transportation that we know. In the extreme, Houston has expanded their Katy Freeway so it is now 23 lanes wide. Less than 2 years after opening a $3 billion freeway widening project, travel times on that freeway were 50% longer than after they had expanded it. Even in the case of this project, ODOT admits that this will not solve what's called recurring or everyday traffic congestion. They hope it'll reduce the number of crashes, which are mostly minor, but it's simply any additional capacity is going to stimulate more traffic. This is a terrific way to waste $450 million. Now, Commissioner Saltzman has offered something on the order of a compromise of doing both of these things, of moving ahead with pricing, which we strongly think would be a good idea and is the only solution that's proven to reduce congestion, and that to also do this project. That is a recipe for wasting $500 million. Let me give you the example of Louisville, Kentucky, which did pretty much exactly that. They had a freeway, not unlike I-5, that connects it with northern suburbs. It was 6 lanes wide. They doubled the size of the freeway bridge. And to pay for that bridge, they tolled that bridge between $1 and $2 each way. And after they tolled that bridge, the traffic on that bridge dropped from 120,000 vehicles a day, virtually the same as the I-5 bridge, to about 60,000 vehicles a day. It dropped by about half. So tolling, if you spend money on new capacity and then toll it later, you ran the real likelihood that you will not have any demand for the facility that you need. So the critical point here is there is no reason to go ahead with this proposal, even if you think it might work, until after you have implemented and observed the effects of tolling, because that will show you that you do not need to spend money on this project and that you can relieve congestion by charging a price.
Perfectly timed. Thanks, Joe. Thank you all. Next 3, please, Carla.
Are Aaron Brown, Stephen Siegel, and Charlie Tso, and they'll be followed by 9, 10, and 11. Tony Jordan, Kim Marks, and Izzy Armenta.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Whaler, Portland City Council. My name is Aaron Brown. First, disclosing myself as a registered lobbyist of the No More Freeway Expansions anti-highway industrial complex. First, highway freeway expansion has never solved traffic congestion. You're going to hear that frequently today. Second, a short story. When I was in college, I spent a couple years living next to a Super America. It's a Midwestern equivalent to a plaid pantry. As an Oregonian unaccustomed to humidity, I found summers really brutal. It didn't take me long to learn that this convenience store sold 48-ounce slushies for 50 cents. You can imagine the joy accompanied by the opportunity to walk less than a block to spend less than $1 on nearly a gallon of corn syrup and ice. If someone had asked me 10 years ago, perhaps, I don't know, the Oregon Department of Slushies, if I was willing to spend a lifetime supply of sweet, refreshing slushies, a card to have slushies whenever I wanted for a low price of $450 million, I'd certainly have considered it. Now, you and I know it's entirely possible that my demand for these slushies might have been, say, induced by its heavy subsidy, my proximity to the convenience store, my youthful ability to enjoy empty carbohydrates with reckless abandon. But maybe I'd take a couple nutrition classes in college and learn I needed to significantly alter my habits to be healthier, like a diet change. Maybe I decide I'm done with corn syrup. A vision zero for corn syrup, in which I really decided I can't have corn syrup anymore. Maybe I'd want to buy slushies in other parts of town. There's some cool slushie shops opening in other parts of town that actually have had historic disinvestment of people to buy slushies from. In any circumstance, I would have to be absolutely certain I really wanted a $450 million card to buy slushies at my local Super America. It means I wouldn't care about my health, wouldn't care about any of these other things. So the question before you, Mayor Wheeler and Portland City Commissioners, how certain are you that you really want to buy a $450 million slushie card? You know how difficult it is to raise money. $64 million for the gas tax, $250 million for the affordable housing bond. This is 7 times the gas tax, twice the affordable housing bond, for a project that, again, has no demonstrable benefits that they are ostensibly claiming to be provided. I hope that you are certain enough, and I hope that the 375 community members who have signed our letter, including the public health groups, social justice leaders, neighborhood associations, and environmentalists, I'm wrapping up, I promise. I hope that that has sowed some doubt before you eventually turn around and give that $450 million to the Oregon Department of Slushies. Please work with the community to help us buy something other than corn syrup. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you for that testimony, which was very entertaining. I challenge anybody else to live up to that. But secondly, thank you for not sending me 375 identical things, just for putting the petition together and telling me that there's that. It's very helpful to be able to see how many people are supporting, and also not to have one's emails completely buried by the same email hundreds of times. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz, this isn't our first rodeo. We've learned how to work together, so thank you for your support.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Steve Siegel. I'm here on behalf of the Downtown Development Group. In our written testimony, we've asked for 4 amendments to the Central City Code. I'll focus on 2 or 3 of them, depending on time. The first issue deals with the undersupply of transferable FAR in the West End. The West End is about half the size of the Pearl District and the downtown district. It contains disproportionate amounts of surface lots, which are prohibited from transferring FAR, underutilized parcels, which will not transfer FAR, and a disproportionate amount of historic landmarks, which can only transfer FAR after seismic upgrades. The city identified an undersupply of FAR in the University District and fixed it by allowing transfers from the downtown district into the University District. We ask that the same thing be done for the West End. Second issue addresses a site we own on Southwest First, abutting the Morrison Bridge ramps. The proposed plan prohibits parking access off of Southwest First where the light rail operates. On this site, Southwest First divides. The light rail dips under the bridge ramps while a auto circulation lane stays at grade. That auto circulation lane is known only at a different grade. It's also physically separated from the light rail alignment. We ask that parking access be allowed subject to an adjustment off of that portion, that segregated portion of Southwest First, and by doing so, it will be able to avoid having the parking access on Southwest Second, which is a city bikeway. Another issue I will raise is the height limits on the block directly north of the Galleria. That block had its height limits reduced because of a viewpoint, which is not iconic. It's a new viewpoint. The city's own analysis rates it as isolated, remote, lack of access. And as a result, a swath of height through downtown is reduced, including on this site. And this site is particularly important for the city because it is a site of a anticipated major mixed-use development that's supposed to anchor the west side of the retail corridor. Thank you.
Mayor, can I just ask a quick
Commissioner
question?
Fish, you bet.
Thank you for laying out the 4 amendments. I want to go back to the West End for a second. So you're asking for an adjustment on the current limitations on the transfer of FAR?
Yes, we're asking that, similar to the University District, that FAR can be transferred into the West End from the downtown district.
What would be your view if the council fashioned some kind of amendment that allowed some transfer of FAR, provided it was to a building that was residential and where the inclusionary housing requirement was met on site?
Well, I don't know that I have a problem with that amendment in and of itself. However, it doesn't solve another problem, which is those buildings that might be mixed use. I mean, one of the objectives of doing the West End plan 15 years ago, I was involved in that, was to make it mixed use.
Fair enough. And of course, the inclusionary housing requirement is only a percentage of the
Yes.
residential. But I appreciate you laying out some concerns you have. I would like to get some feedback from you at some later point about whether this could be done in a targeted way that ensures we get more housing with inclusionary housing investments made on site and not in lieu.
Yes, Commissioner, we'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Charlie So. I'm a member of Portlanders for Parking Reform, and I'm also here with No More Freeway Expansions Coalition. I'm here to tell you that urban freeway expansion has never solved congestion. Numerous research studies have shown that adding more road capacity results in more driving. This phenomenon is called induced demand, and it makes freeway widening projects fruitless by eroding new capacity. In 2015, the California State DOT publicly acknowledged that widening freeways inevitably creates more traffic. Research shows that a capacity expansion of 10% leads to an increase in VMT by 6% to 10%. So why does adding capacity create more traffic? When driving is inconvenient because of congestion, many people respond by driving in off-peak hours or on alternative routes or traveling by different modes or not taking the trip altogether. So when we add new capacity to make driving easier, we're incentivizing people who previously make other choices to avoid congestion to drive on the freeway during rush hour. So what is the alternative to investing $450 million in the freeway widening project? Well, to ensure that our existing transportation system is working efficiently, we need to implement congestion pricing. We also need to invest in affordable options like public transit and bicycling. The transportation is the second largest household expenditure after housing, and we need to make living in Portland more affordable by enabling people to not depend on driving. We are at a crossroads here today, and we have to decide what kind of city Portland will become in the future. Will we build more freeways and let our city be choked by cars, or will we take rational and responsible actions today to ensure that Portland remains livable and affordable? For these reasons, I urge City Council to take the I-5 Rhodes Quarter expansion project out of the Central City Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next three, please.
Are Tony Jordan, Kim Marks, and Izzy Armenta. And they'll be followed by 12, 13, and 14, Stuart Emmons, Walter Weiler, and Dan McFarling.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Jordan, the founder of Portlanders for Parking Reform, and I also believe that urban freeway expansion has never solved congestion. Our planet is convulsing. We're drowning and burning at the same time. Our federal government is in denial, and our children are looking to us to take responsible action. Against this backdrop, we're considering a 20-year plan that expands highways and builds more parking garages. This is not a responsible action. This plan, in its action plans, calls for public resources to build or incentivize more car garages in Chinatown and Central Eastside Industrial District. These garages will be full of stalls that are very expensive, $50,000 or more if we take the convention center as an example, and we'll be paying for them for decades. These are no-win garages. If we meet our mode split and climate goals, we won't generate revenue and we'll lose a lot of money. If they are full, that will signal that we failed in our more important climate goals. Prosper Portland and Peabody say the garages can be converted to other uses. I say prove it. I ask the council to require that any garage built, leased, or purchased by the public be 100% convertible to active uses: housing, offices, retail, not storage. I also ask you each to think deeply about the message that this building these garages send and the legacy it would leave. Mayor Wheeler, you've been outspoken on climate, and I really appreciate that. And you're also the commissioner for Prosper Portland. If you think that these garages are the right thing to build, I challenge you to name them after yourself. So in 20 years, Portlanders can look upon the Ted Wheeler parking garage and determine if it was a good investment or wonder why we're still paying for something that no one uses and that undermined our climate goals for 20 years. So please remove the amendments in the action plan that call for more structured parking and require that any new public parking be 100% convertible to active uses. Thank you.
That was very clever. Well played. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Marks. I'm the Director of Transportation Equity for the Rosewood Commission, or Rosewood Initiative, excuse me. Rosewood Initiative supports the concept of value pricing or congestion pricing on the I-5 corridor, as long as there are mitigations for low-income people. However, we do not support the expansion
We need to,
of this
excuse me,
corridor.
Mayor, the captions are off.
Yes. I'm sorry?
Sorry, the captions are off. We have to
They're
wait.
probably switching at 3:30.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Are they up?
Almost.
They're back on. I apologize for the interruption.
No worries. We believe that the monies from congestion pricing can be used for other purposes as long as there are, again, mitigations for low-income people. Yesterday, I testified in support of the Growing Transit Communities Project, which you approved. We also talked about upgrading 148th and 162nd so that they would be accessible for people using public transit and create north-south transit corridors. Earlier, a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, you also approved the Enhanced Transit Corridors Plan. In both conversations, the question kept coming up, how can we pay for these plans? Congestion pricing on the I-5 corridor and on I-205, I would add, can help pay for these projects and then some. A couple numbers to think about when thinking about how to spend $500 million. $500 million would buy, if I may, 500 linear miles of sidewalks, 5,000 crosswalks that are signalized depending on the amount of treatment, and 1,000 buses. That's a lot of effort towards safety. That's a lot of effort towards reducing congestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony.
Mayor, I'm going to claim naming rights for the eco roofs. Thanks for that, Tony.
That's good material.
Did Izzy Armenta, did I get them? Izzy Armenta, number 11. We'll go with Stuart Emmons, number 12, Walter Weiler, and Dan McFarling, 12, 13, and 14. Thank you. And they'll be followed by Bob Solinger, Mary Coolidge, and Jim Labby, 15, 16, and 17.
Stuart, why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be here. We are Portland. Our history of progressive urban ideas is impressive. We are a city with a level of livability that is the envy of many U.S. cities. We're growing. We might have 600,000 new residents in the next few decades. Our freeways are already clogged. Finding affordable housing close to where people work is more and more of a challenge. Freeway expansion is hugely expensive and proven not to reduce congestion. Mobility is a large component of our livability. We need to prioritize mass transit and bikes and not add freeway lanes. The $500 million for the Rose Quarter is a terrible investment in our future. The money should be reallocated to 4 things. One is to make mass transit faster, like going underground in downtown, and increase service to East Portland. 2, to improve bike and pedestrian safety and increase bike lanes. 3, congestion pricing that is equitable. I'm very concerned about congestion pricing for people who have lower incomes in outlying areas. And 4, a long-term plan to get I-5 off our central east side waterfront. Please reallocate all funds dedicated for freeway expansion in Portland to improve mobility, improve livability, and improve our environment. Let's do a Portland solution. Let's not add a $500 million freeway lanes that's only 1 mile long for 2 little lanes. Let's add bike lanes. Let's add mass transit options. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Nicely done.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, thank you for this hearing and thank you for your dedicated service. It is recognized and appreciated. I'm Walter Weiler. I'm an owner of property and resident in the West End. My comments concern the South Park blocks, a unique oasis and treasure of Portland's pedestrian-friendly culture. This green walkway deserves special protection as it ultimately becomes a key segment of the inspirational Green Loop. 2 suggestions. Move the South Park and bordering blocks into the West End Planning District, thus removing this sensitive oasis from the high-density plans of the central city. Number 2, limit building heights bordering the park blocks to 75 feet for reasons of sunlight, density, and preservation of park blocks' peaceful, welcoming neighborhoods to avoid the creation of a park in a canyon. Thank you for considering my suggestions. That is my 1-minute story, and I'm sticking to it.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Good job, Walter.
The next 3 are Bob Solinger, Mary Coolidge, and Jim Labby, 15, 16, and 17. And they'll be followed by Michael Alina, Ed McVicker, and Sadefumi Uchiyama, 18, 20, and 21.
Bob, on behalf of the council, we want to express our condolences about your VW bus. It had a good run.
Tragic.
Thank you.
It had a good run.
I suppose in the scheme of things, the loss of a VW bus to a fire is a very small thing these days, but sad nonetheless. Good afternoon. My name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Conservation Director for the Portland Audubon Society. We participated extensively in the development of the Central City Plan, served on a couple of the committees. We're excited about this plan. It's been a while since the City of Portland has really brought forward new innovative green initiatives. We're a national leader, but we've been in sort of a slow period in recent years. And this includes some really exciting things. Bird-friendly building design, reduced light pollution, expanded greenway, district tree targets, green loop, and a green roof mandate. We submitted extensive comments on this plan. We urge you to support all of those things, but we're also asking you to consider a few amendments that we think would make them stronger. I'm going to highlight a couple, and then Mary Coolidge from Audubon will highlight a couple more. The first is the greenway expansion from 25 to 50 feet. This is absolutely essential to meet our ecological goals, our access goals, and our recreational goals. But unfortunately, that expansion doesn't come with any mechanisms to actually get existing development when it redevelops out of the greenway. It's likely, and most of it, that those second 25 feet are already developed, it's likely that those will continue to be developed over time unless we either put in regulations or incentives to encourage people to move back. And so we're really urging you to consider including some sort of mechanism to do that. The second thing that I want to highlight is the green roof mandate. We support Commissioner Udaley's recommendation amendment to expand that to 100%. 60% really is too low. We also encourage you to bring back the incentive program for buildings under 20,000 square feet that are not covered by this mandate, and to focus primarily on projects that have an equity component to them. It's important that we get green roofs on all of our structures, and I think the incentive program for buildings underneath 20,000 square feet would be very helpful. Finally, we are a member of the No New Freeway Coalition. We strongly oppose the expansion of the freeway. I want to focus really on the climate change impacts and on the air pollution impacts and on the equity impacts. This is not consistent with our equity goals, our climate change goals, and it diverts funding from places that really do need it. So we strongly encourage you to go beyond simply the congestion pricing and to eliminate this project altogether. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is it Audubon's position that solar installations and eco-roofs can coexist?
Absolutely. All the data shows that actually they are not only compatible, solar panels function better on top of an eco-roof because of the cooling effect that they have.
Thank you.
So they can go together. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I actually think I'm up next. Good
Very good.
afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Mary Coolidge, and I work for Audubon Society of Portland. We applaud the inclusion of a bird-safe glazing standard and exterior lighting standard in the Central City 2035 plan, which demonstrate the city taking steps to ensure that we are maintaining the ecological integrity of our urban landscape. We strongly support the establishment of a new bird-safe exterior glazing standard to address window strike hazards on the glassiest buildings in the Central City. Window collisions are among the leading killers of birds worldwide, and across the United States, strikes account for up to 1 billion deaths annually. As Portland grows and develops, it is important to address the ever-increasing hazard of unmarked glass, especially in light of glazing increases designed to activate ground floor uses. Adoption of a bird-safe glazing standard is consistent with the city's green building policy and will help meet comprehensive plan policies calling for bird-friendly building design. The Central City Plan also includes requirements to limit light pollution along the Willamette River Greenway. While we appreciate this step forward, we would like to see the city take a more significant step to comprehensively address the growing issue of light pollution in our region. There is a large body of evidence demonstrating that artificial light at night has negative impacts on human health, fish, wildlife, and plants. Poorly designed, inefficient lighting also represents tremendous wasted energy and obscures stars that migrating birds rely on to navigate. The cumulative impacts of light pollution are not limited to areas along the river, and addressing light pollution across the entire Central City is critical, given the amount of development that is projected to occur in our city in the coming decades. We urge City Council to take a step forward to apply best management practices in exterior lighting to the entire Central City in order to meet comprehensive plan policies, climate action plan goals, and to minimize a broad range of unintended health, safety, and ecological impacts. Written comments submitted yesterday by Audubon Society of Portland reflect specific recommendations for expansion of the exterior lighting standard. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, City Council. My name is Jim Labby. I'm here today as the new interim director of DPAVE. DPAVE is looking for a new executive director, if anyone's interested. I hope to save some time we want to second the comments from the Urban Forestry Commission Policy Committee and Audubon Society of Portland. We're also signatories to the No More Freeways Expansions Coalition as an organization. It's dedicating our sweat, blood, and tears to removing unnecessary pavement for people, wildlife, and water. We really are disappointed to see unnecessary pavement going in, especially, with so little results to expect in the new freeway expansion. There is a lot to support in the Central City Plan, and we thank you for that. It could still go a long ways to really achieve the aspirations in the new comp plan that envision a new relationship between green infrastructure and the built environment, really for public health at its core. We really appreciate and support Commissioner Udaley's amendment to expand the eco-roof requirement provisions. And we've submitted written comments. I would just want to highlight the issue of the canopy targets in the Central City. We really feel like they fall short and accept the existing limitations without aspiring to something larger in terms of what we can do. And the next, especially, the opportunities are particularly fruitful in the public right-of-way. And I think if the council moves forward with the public right-of-way task force, interbureau task force that you're going to be looking at in November, we can start looking at those opportunities. There's a lot there we can do to expand the urban forest canopy. The last piece I wanted to really emphasize is removing those exemptions in Title 11 for the commercial industrial lands that were meant to be temporary and really allow, they allow the extension of really toxic neighborhoods by given everything we know about what trees and how they function for public health, not requiring just the basic standards in Title 11 to the entire city is to continue to allow that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, all three of you.
We're going to go back to number 14, Jim Howell, and we'll do Ed McVicker and Sadafumi Uchiyama, and they'll be followed by 22, 23, and 24, Burton Francis, Wendy Rom, and David Dixon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have some testimony that handed out. I also, my name is Jim Howell. I also agree that expanding freeways does not solve congestion, but public transit does. The Transportation System Plan and the Central City Plan do not address the travel needs that are of commuters that are not destined to downtown. Most jobs in the metro region are outside the central city, yet interregional commuters must travel through it if they choose public transit. These commuters will continue to drive around downtown on crowded freeways because taking buses or MAX through downtown will continue to be slow, crowded, and unreliable, and MAX lacks capacity for future growth. The interlockings at the approaches to the Steel Bridge are at capacity today. MAX needs an additional river crossing and must be able to bypass downtown streets if it is to meet the public transit needs of the future. Unfortunately, these vital needs are totally ignored in the TSP and the CC 2035 plan. An east-west MAX tunnel between the Lloyd District and Goose Hollow with subway stations at Rose Quarter and Pioneer Square, plus a north-south bike MAX viaduct across the inner east side connecting the Rose Quarter to the MAX station at OMSI could provide this infrastructure. The cost would be substantial, but probably no more than the cost of the proposed Southwest Corridor project with its many flaws. Ridership growth on TriMet peaked 3 years ago. Last year, it dropped 2%. Fewer people are riding buses than they did 20 years ago. And ridership is even dropping on MAX. Meanwhile, traffic congestion is increasing on both city streets and freeways at an alarming rate. Why then is a freeway expansion the only significant transportation project in the CC 2035 plan? The I-5 Broadway-Weidler project proposed by ODOT will be a total waste of taxpayers' money because even with much-needed congestion pricing, it does not provide an alternative. And since it's beginning, I won't talk about the alternative. There is one, but I say until an alternative analysis is completed that models the comparative costs and benefits of each mode in the corridor, please eliminate this project from the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Hi there. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Udaley, Fritz, and Fish for the opportunity to speak before City Council today. My name is Michael Elena, and on behalf of the Portland Japanese Garden, as a volunteer and trustee on the board, I would like to address the CCSW's 06 View Corridor as proposed by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. In testimony before the Planning and Sustainability Commission, I felt our message and request for a protected view corridor for the Portland Japanese Garden's view of Mount Hood, looking east from the Garden Pavilion building, was misunderstood. To that end, the BPS approved a truncated view corridor which does not address the potential impact of trees in the environmental zone between Southwest Sherwood Boulevard going east to the South Reservoir in Washington Park. On behalf of the Portland Japanese Garden, I am asking that the current view corridor as described by BPS be amended to extend the Portland Japanese Garden's view corridor through the environmental zone between Southwest Sherwood Boulevard to the South Reservoir in Washington Park. The Portland Japanese Garden requests this change because we believe the mature height of western red cedars and Douglas firs can reach well over 300 feet. That potential will impact the view looking east from the pavilion in the garden to Mount Hood. We look at this issue from a perspective of 50 to 100 years out. Please refer to the attached drawings which illustrate current recommendations from BPS and the garden's request for the corridor extension. A protected view corridor, including this extension, is instrumental in our ability to protect one of the most iconic views in the city, a view that is near and dear to hundreds of thousands of Portland citizens and visitors to the Portland Japanese Garden every year. We appreciate your support and assistance in moving this cause forward. It is an unselfish pursuit whose intent is to preserve a treasure for all time. Thank you.
Michael,
Very good.
May, if I could, Michael, thank you for the presentation and the materials, and I had an opportunity to go up to the Japanese garden and actually see for myself what you're proposing. And I have to say, and the mayor now has offered an amendment which would meet this objective. I'm hard-pressed to find a reason why we should not support that, but I'll be listening carefully to testimony, and when the planning staff comes back, I have some questions. This does not give you license to do anything. This just creates a corridor so that there are opportunities to manage the view. And I do believe that this particular view corridor is one of the treasures of our city, and it ought to at least be protected so that the Japanese garden and other stakeholders can have a say in how it's managed. But I'll be interested to hear if there's any opposition to this from any of the public testimony.
I would as well, and I want to reinforce the fact that we're doing something looking 100 years out. We want to protect this for generations to come.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Was there an Ed McVicker? Okay, he's number 20. And we'll go with Sadafumi Uchiyama and Burton Francis. And they'll be followed by Wendy Rom, David Dixon, and Rick Caskey, 23, 24, and 25.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ed McVicker. I'm a resident of Portland in the Crestwood Edition. I'm also a volunteer at the Japanese Garden. I'm on the board. I go there once a week and clean the moss, and I've grown to love the place. I'm here to support and give a big thumbs up to the amendment that you offered, Mr. Mayor, and feel that it's a wonderful opportunity for us to include in our planning process for the next, as Michael said, 100 years. I think more than 50, because that seems more manageable to me, but it's still a wonderful opportunity to help us plan for the future. Incidentally, I would also like to support Mary Coolidge's notion about birds and the idea of non-strike whenever possible, avoiding that, or at least mitigating that as much as possible, and also the light pollution issue, not very often spoken of, but highly important. So with that, I say thank you for your hard work and your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Sadafumi Uchiyama. I'm a private citizen and the garden curator of Portland Japanese Garden. I just don't want to take any more time, so I would like to support Mike Elena's testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your being here. Thanks for your great work. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Burton Francis. I'm a resident of the Pearl, and I'm an attorney. Oregon State Planning Goal Number 1 mandates that land use actions must occur through a broadly representative cross-section of affected citizens in all phases of the planning process. And yet, according to the Northwest Examiner analysis, 24 out of the 33 West Quadrant SAC members were developers, architects, or other related interests. And also importantly, I think it's important to point out that few actual residents of the central city were a member of that SAC. So the composition of the SAC was not broadly representative, but it was rather heavily skewed towards the development interests that are financially directly benefiting from the activities of that SAC and from the economic changes that occur from this plan. An ethics complaint was filed, as you know, regarding the West Quadrant SAC, and the ombudsperson found that the SAC members are public officials and thus required to disclose conflicts of interest. And the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability attempted to rectify that failure by requiring after-the-fact disclosures. Yet, as recently stated by one of the SAC members, and I quote, "The issue was not simply SAC members voting in their own undisclosed interest, but actively advocating in their own interest for increase in height on properties that they controlled without any disclosure, either before or after. So since there was no transparency in the face of quite robust conflicts of interest, the process itself produced recommendations that are irredeemably unscrupulous. So regarding after-the-fact disclosures, the facts as set forth in Plan Volume 6, Attachment B, show that almost 10% of the SAC didn't even respond to the after-the-fact disclosure request. So the remedy didn't work. Thus, the conflicts are not even that of non-disclosure, that they didn't even dignify this council with disclosure, are a complete unknown. They can't be fathomed. So I would request that the council reject and redo the West Quadrant portion of the plan because of those unfathomable unknowns that can't be corrected by the council. I would just add that I wholeheartedly endorse the mayor's 2 view corridor proposals. We could call them the Wheeler view corridors. That's fine with me. And also, Commissioner Fritz, I endorse your step-down proposal. If you remember my prior testimony before this council, I am a big fan of that design criteria, and it's very centrally set forth in all the design criteria that we have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Have you compiled a map of which particular properties in the West End you feel have a conflict of interest on them?
There has been some work done on that. I haven't done it myself, but I know that it's out there. But my request, and I'm glad you asked, my request would entail that I think to do a complete do-over is unmanageable, and we got to move forward. But I think that if there's a 2-step remedy where there's an investigation that identifies those things, right, and then there are recommendations that say, well, despite that, they still make sense, or there are alternatives.
Yeah.
That would be the true remedy of
Thank
this
you very much. I
situation.
appreciate that suggestion.
Thank you. Thanks, all 3 of you.
The next 3 are Wendy Rom, David Dixon, and Rick Caskey, and they'll be followed by 26, 27, and 28. Richard Lowenstone, Andrew Plambeck, and Shelley Romero.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Rom, a West End resident and a board member of Architectural Heritage Center Bosco Milligan Foundation. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I've attended most of the meetings of the Central City Concept Plan and the West Quadrant Plan. There was no voice for the West End on the West Quadrant Stakeholders Advisory Committee, also called the SAC. More important, there were serious conflicts of interest on the SAC, as was confirmed by the Ombudsman's finding. In my view, this is serious enough to call for creating a new committee with a higher percentage of Central City residents and excluding non-Portland residents to review the flawed conclusions contained in this plan, especially regarding building heights, FAR, vistas, and unmet open space needs of the West End as it densifies. Most important is that the maximum building heights in the West End need to be lowered to 100 feet. The result will be to discourage demolition, encourage rehabilitation and reuse, both of which will help preserve a large number of existing affordable housing units in the district, a top priority today. See examples of affordable housing on pages 2, 4, and 5 in my detailed recommendations. This area is also dense in pre-1935 buildings whose architecture tells Portland's story. As award-winning West Coast writer Wallace Stegner said, "If you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are." Place is not a spot on the map. The West End's distinct sense of place consists of over 100 vintage Northwest buildings. The West End has been praised in national travel magazines and newspapers as a unique place worth visiting. There is economic value in its sense of place, never quantified in the height calculations for this plan. And Portland is known for its historic vistas, most of which disappear in this plan. Please consider reviewing the conclusions on these topics prior to final approval. And I would also like to add I support Wheeler's view corridor amendments and Commissioner Fritz's bridgehead and Commissioner Udaley's green roofs, for sure, and Mary Coolidge's light pollution and bird amendments.
Wendy, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
First of all, do you have a position on any of the proposed naming opportunities?
No,
Just
I
kidding.
wish I did.
Just kidding. Dan's not here, so feel
I know,
free
I know.
to.
She can have the freeway.
Yeah, well, there you go. But I would put your name on something.
So I want to, since you're the second person that's talked about the process question and then
Yes.
how it affects what we're doing.
Yes.
First, I want to let you know that my colleagues and I are working on a comprehensive update to how we deal with boards and commissions of the city.
I am aware of that.
And it is going to include new requirements, training, ways of tracking things. And it frankly was long overdue and has been informed by a number of examples that we've looked at. So I don't want you to think that's fallen on deaf ears, because I do think there's some things we need to do, standards we need to establish. I also think we need to do a better job of training, creating uniform bylaws, and giving the volunteers the tools they need to be successful. I think
Absolutely.
it's not just on them, it's on us too.
Yeah.
But I want to go back because we're going to hear from time to time people say, well, because there was a conflict of interest, we should start over. You may agree or disagree with this, but let's say there was someone on the committee that had an undisclosed conflict and cast a vote. The concern that we have as a policy matter is that that person may personally benefit from something they're acting on, and we don't have the benefit of knowing that, okay? So that is something that we need to curb in the future. But the recommendation that that person's voting on, whether a building should have 100 feet, or a setback should be 25 feet, or whatever, those things to me feel like more objective kinds of standards that we're going to grapple with. And so it may be that someone supported a proposal because they saw a personal benefit. But I still think through this process, we as a governing body get to look fresh at the recommendations. And so if you were to say that you're concerned about the conflict, fair enough. But what really resonates with me is, and I think the heights should not be above X in the West End, or I don't agree with the transfer of FAR, or I think this, because we have a chance to look at this fresh. So I just want to draw that distinction, but also let you know that there is a big update on boards and commissions
I
coming
really
down.
appreciate that. And in fact, before coming to Portland, I served on a lot of different advisory committees and one thing or another. And in the state of Virginia, they have very strict conflict of interest laws. If you have a conflict of interest, first, you must disclose in writing. And then if that property comes under discussion, you must leave the room and you may not vote on it.
Well, and those are the kinds of things.
Those are other possibilities.
And frankly, again, I don't want to let us off the hook here.
Yeah.
I think there has been some chronic confusion about who does qualify as a public official.
I think that's
and what
true.
body of law applies.
Yeah, I think
and
that's
I don't
fair.
think that's on citizen volunteers to figure out. I think the city has to be much clearer
Yeah,
about
I
what
agree.
we're asking someone to do,
Yep.
what their role is, what body of law applies, whether their emails can be obtained through public records.
Right.
And so there are some long overdue changes coming.
Yeah.
But I don't think it prevents us in this forum from addressing concerns you or anyone else have about the specific recommendations.
I think that some of the conclusions, specifically, as I said, and certainly for the West End's heights, they were never really discussed because there was nobody at the table to discuss them. I was part of the public and came in and was limited to 2 minutes each session. Those issues that I raised were never discussed. Those things were passed but on consent agenda, as a consent agenda item. So I do think that the building heights in the West End, the FAR issues, they've raised the FARs, and actually RX and CX, there are a number of issues that were just never discussed. So there, I will.
Thank you, Mayor. And they weren't discussed all that much at council either. Commissioner, I agree with everything that you said. Also, this process was identified as how we were going to correct the problems that the Ombudsman found. So it is up to us, and that's why I was asking the question about which particular properties should we look at more closely in this process. We've got 2 new members of the council.
Yes,
We really
I
do
appreciate that.
need to take a fresh look at the whole area.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm David Dixon. As a West End resident, I love to walk north along 10th Street to the library or Powell's, to the First Unitarian Church on 12th, to Artist Repertory Theater on 15th, to the Portland Thorns games at Providence Park. I love the old churches, the restaurants, the shops, the apartments, the occasional historic residence. They all come together in a slower paced, comfortable, and walkable part of town that is unique to this city. Often when I head south on my return trip, I catch a streetcar. It's generally packed with a diverse group of Portlanders. People are always considerate to make seats available to the many elderly residents of the West End who do their business in the city by public transit. The West End is one of the densest areas of affordable, subsidized housing in the city. Many seniors, low-income people, and people with disabilities are my neighbors. I treasure my community and fear what would happen if more and more older structures were to be torn down and replaced with tall residential or commercial buildings. Would elderly people find space on overcrowded streetcars? Would they dare walk on busy streets? Would Section 8 apartments be replaced by market-priced residences, depriving Portland of an already inadequate supply of low-income housing? Would my walks become more perilous through Pearl District-like traffic, sunless wind tunnels, and cold concrete and glass storefronts? I don't assume that affordable housing would survive this change. I urge the council to protect affordable housing and the unique livability of the West End and set 100-foot limits on building height. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and first of all, I would like to thank the City Council for all the time and effort you've put into making our city such a wonderful place. My name is Rick Caskey, and I have recently immigrated from the Pearl District to the West End. As a resident of the West End, I very much want to encourage the City Council to enact and enforce the 100-foot building height limit in the West End and to keep the FAR at 6.1, ratio of 6:1. And the reasons are it makes the area comfortable and accessible and friendly for locals and tourists. It helps preserve the feeling created by the many historic buildings that we have in the area. New buildings will then blend in and reinforce the existing feel of the neighborhood. And it will reduce incentives to demolish the historic buildings in the neighborhood and encourage their rehabilitation and reuse. And it will provide a transition from the tall buildings in the downtown area to the shorter buildings in the neighboring districts. My second favorite city on the planet after Portland is Paris, France. The central part of Paris is an excellent example of the positive effects of limiting building heights and encouraging utilization of older buildings, which they in France have done for decades. On a similar topic, one of the wonderful aspects of living in the West End for locals and for the many visitors that we have is the South Park blocks. To allow tall buildings on the sides of the blocks would totally change the ambiance, making it more cave-like than park-like. And tall buildings would block the sunshine and therefore run the risk of negatively impacting the trees, plants, bushes, grass, and other vegetation that make the park blocks so appealing. So I highly support the concept of limiting the heights of the buildings that border the park blocks to 75 or 100 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
The next three are Richard Lowenshone, Andrew Plambeck, and Shelley Romero. And they'll be followed by 29, 30, and 31, Steve Leathers, Courtney Ferris, and Adam Segal.
Good afternoon.
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for the work you've been doing, and I thank you for allowing me to offer my testimony on the draft. I'm a property owner and resident of the West End, and as a resident, I think it's very important to preserve the community feel that comes with the limitation on height for the many new buildings expected in our area in the coming years.
Could you give us your name for the record, please?
I'm sorry, Richard Lowenson. Many of the older buildings in the West End are attractive and should be saved. For this reason, I support the proposition to explicitly encourage reuse, rehabilitation, and seismic upgrade of buildings within this area. I also support the proposal to require protection of sunlight for the park blocks. Greenery and light are important to our community and very much at risk from the shadows of tall buildings, such as that of the Ladd Tower. For the West End, I support an FAR of 6:1 with a 100-foot maximum building height, which would still meet the city's density goals. At the same time, it would discourage demolition of these older buildings and support renovation. I have protested earlier against the conflict of interest among the developers who voted on the liberalization of building heights and zoning, and that's been amply covered here. I would just reiterate that I think the height and zoning recommendations in that area should be revisited, and residents of the communities involved should have a voice in the decisions. As anyone who has visited Europe will confirm, the most attractive urban areas are those that have been spared aggressive development through the ages, and thus retain some of their original character. An occasional tall building can be a landmark. A grouping of them creates sunless, windy canyons without views for anyone. The West End is both a cultural and a residential area, and tall towers bring a population density far beyond what this area was designed for. Totally off topic, I just want to support strongly the opposition to building a $500,000 freeway. I've lived in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Chicago, and every time a new freeway got built, all it did was create more density on the freeways and more expansion of traffic.
Thank you.
$500 million.
$500 million.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Planbeck. I'm the Region 1 Government Liaison for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I'm here to talk about the I-5 Rose Quarter project, which is the result of the I-5 Broadway-Weidler Interchange Plan, which was adopted unanimously by the City Council and the Oregon Transportation Commission in 2012. The project received funding in state gas tax dollars from the legislature earlier this year. It'll add an auxiliary lane and shoulder to I-5 between the Fremont Bridge and I-84, creating a direct connection that will reduce weaving and merging to improve safety and operations without adding any additional through lanes. In addition to the highway improvement, the project will remove the Broadway and Weidler overcrossings, rebuilding them as an innovative lid over I-5, creating new open space and better east-west surface connections through the area. The project also includes a bicycle and pedestrian bridge at Clackamas Street, a key connection for the city's Green Loop concept. As ODOT moves into the environmental assessment on the project, we look forward to the city's partnership and an equitable process that builds on the planning work the city and ODOT have already done. At the same time, we are investing $130 million to build the Outer Powell Transportation Safety Project in one of the most diverse and underserved parts of East Portland, with that road being transferred to the city's ownership upon completion. We are also paving and rebuilding sidewalks and ADA ramps on Southeast 82nd from Foster to King with a $14 million investment, and working closely with the city to build out safety improvements on North Lombard. Finally, ODOT is working to submit a proposal for value pricing on I-5 and I-205 to the federal government by the end of next year. Our advisory committee for guiding that work includes strong representatives for equity, social justice, and environmental justice to ensure that the proposal does not place the burden of managing congestion on those least able to afford it. We look forward to the City of Portland's partnership in all of these projects and hope the I-5 Rose Quarter project can be a solid foundation for the city's implementation of the other elements of the Central City 2035 plan, providing a catalyst for the vision shared today.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, of course, Commissioner
I'm
Fritz.
sorry, folks, this is obviously a big issue here. If we didn't do the freeway widening bits of the project and we did all the others, would that still be funded by the state?
My understanding is no, that's not what the legislature has provided funding for.
So we can't just take that money and use it for something else?
I do not believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Shelley Romero. I'm the Public Policy and Community Affairs Manager for ODOT Region 1, and I'm here to kind of tag team on Andrew's remarks. Wanted to let you know that ODOT is leading an environmental and public process, which includes a robust understanding, research, and engagement strategy of the historically wronged African American community and other communities of color. We understand the historic inequity concerns and will engage all communities in this project. ODOT's work on the Outer Powell environmental and public process provided us with the opportunity to successfully engage upwards of about 100 folks from equity populations, including the Russian, Latino, Vietnamese, and Chinese communities, and also economically disadvantaged stakeholders, resulting in a project that is reflective of feedback from all communities. ODOT, as part of any environmental project, is required to examine the benefits and burdens to environmental justice communities in how and where projects are being constructed and how decisions are being made. We follow this legally prescribed process, but we don't limit ourselves to only including we look at additional tactics and strategies that will proactively, innovatively invite broad participation and insights. As Andrew mentioned, we're investing $130 million for Outer Powell alone, not to mention 82nd Lombard and some significant improvements on I-205 between the Johnson Creek Bridge and the Glen Jackson Bridge, headed northbound and then also southbound. And for us, it's really not about, is it East Portland versus Central City? It is and should be and can be about both. Several people have brought up the issue of congestion pricing, but there has been very little mention about how equity considerations, when you look at congestion pricing on this section of I-5, would be taken into consideration. Finally, we invite the city to join us to find equitable transportation solutions and to work with us to implement this project. It's a quick opportunity for us to take a look at implementing multimodal transportation improvements and how these may facilitate zoning changes, development opportunities, and housing. And we welcome the city as a partner to examine, aside from transportation improvements, what other opportunities may present themselves to advance the Central City Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all three for your
May I
testimony.
just take
Commissioner Fritz.
one more personal provision? I just want to thank ODOT for all your work on the freeway barriers that we've seen going up all over the state. It's really much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next three are Steve Leathers, Courtney Ferris, and Adam Segal. And they'll be followed by 32, 33, and 34, William Smith, Randy Gregg, and Steve Bazone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Leathers. I'm here on behalf of Design Week Portland. This spring, Design Week Portland completed its 5th year. The festival started as a grassroots collective of independent programs by and for Portland's design community. And with over 300 events that span all disciplines, Design Week Portland has become the central address for design in Portland. With the community organized and activated, the festival has begun to act as an interface between the city, designers, and its citizens. The Green Loop served as a prototype for how a competition and exhibition could function as a program of civic engagement through design. This year at the Red, we worked with Untitled Studio and created an exhibition, and there was a civic engagement that received over 400 responses in regard to the Green Loop and its future. And the sentiment was overwhelmingly positive. Positive responses outnumbered negative 2.8 to 1. That's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for your time. I'm Courtney Ferris. I'm part of the team Untitled Studio that collaborated with Design Week Portland and others to pull together this design exhibition on the Green Loop. Our team spent the last year and a half thinking and listening to Portland's ideas and concerns about the Green Loop and how it could affect their community and their city. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what we've heard. So over the course of 1 week in April, an old warehouse in Central Eastside played host to a myriad of interactive activities and interventions focused on the Green Loop, from panel discussions to workshops, charrettes, prototypes, and tours. This experiment to engage Portland in the Green Loop resulted in participation of over 3,000 people. What we heard was overwhelmingly positive. The majority of people we talked with had collected comments were excited and supportive of the Green Loop's potential, but were concerned about the manner in which it is carried out. So to us, what we heard from the exhibition was not that we should pull away from pursuing this project, but instead dig in further and find ways to address these concerns, listen very carefully, and be critical and open to trying new ideas. It's been a very exciting, eye-opening, and humbling experience to speak and interact with so many about this project. As you begin to unpack the breadth of comments you've heard today, I hope you'll take a quiet moment to read through our final report where we have gone into more detail and dream for yourselves about how the Green Loop could be part of crafting the vision and values you hope for the future of our city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Adam Siegel. I'm part of Untitled Studio with Courtney. And it's an honor to be here. Some of you are familiar because we've done a project together. And actually, in preparing these remarks, Mayor Wheeler, I thought a lot about your comments in the State of the City address this past March. In that speech, you spoke of a potential new West, a West Coast that will advocate progressive values in order to, quote, affirm our highest values and abandon our basic instincts. You continued, quote, "In the year to come, our city will show what it means to master the basic requirements of governance and address challenges that seem intractable. We will show what it means to live our values and generate new, compelling ideas." I really love that. And in an interview this past January, you expressed to us that the Green Loop is, quote, "exactly the kind of innovative vision that Portlanders can get around, and it's a long-term vision that could really do a great job of defining what we want the community to be in the distant future." It's no secret to anybody here that Portland is facing a number of challenges: rapid growth, displacement, crises of unaffordability and houselessness, which continually raise the question, who exactly is this city for? The feedback from our exhibition this spring revealed that those who are critical or concerned about the Green Loop are seeing it through this lens. Will the construction of the Green Loop continue to price out and displace longtime residents? Will it benefit only the wealthy? Will it homogenize Portland's unique character and make underrepresented populations feel unwelcome? As my colleagues have been keen to remind me throughout the past few years when we've been working on this, no matter how incredible the Green Loop is, it won't be able to solve all of these issues. But as an innovative vision for Portland's future, it can be built with a strong set of core values that define the Portland we all want to see. So I'm here today to ask that the Green Loop be built truly for everyone, that it be physically and culturally accessible, that it be developed through extensive community input, especially by those whose voices have historically been muted, that it feels welcoming and safe even for the persecuted, that it feels as if it belonged as much to the resident of the central city as to the resident of the outer neighborhoods, and that everyone, the houseless and the housed, feels a collective ownership of this unifying space in the central city. Thank you.
Excellent testimony. Thank you.
The next three are William Smith, Randy Craig, and Steve Bazone. And they'll be followed by 35, 36, and 37, Thomas Ray, Martha Sharp, and Dave Woodall.
Very good. And colleagues, just while they're coming up, at what time do we think we lose the quorum?
Well, we've got a 4:30 time certain, right? We're going to stop on that one.
Yeah, so here, just to update people who may have, we're obviously not going to get to everybody's personal testimony today. Again, there will be other opportunities for those of you that we don't get to today, and we'll, of course, take written testimony anytime. And I apologize that we're not going to be able to get through everybody's testimony today. We will move into the next item, and it may be that, how many people are signed up for the last item?
I do not have that sheet.
Okay.
There it is.
Or is that it right
That looks
there?
like, do you have the other one for the second item?
Well, we'll worry about that in a
One
minute.
person, it looks
Sorry?
like, signed up for 4:30.
So we only have one person signed up for
4:30.
that one?
So we can maybe keep going.
Yeah, so why don't we do this? Why don't we, let's add at least another 15 minutes and go to 4:45 and see where we are.
And then it would be your intention, Mayor, that people who've signed up would be called in the order that they signed up for next time?
Still, absolutely.
Yeah.
That would, I think, be the equitable thing to do. Good. Thank you. Sorry to
Can I
interrupt.
just clarify one point that was
Please.
made? The written testimony, the record, the way it was noticed, the record closes on the 15th. And then
Correct.
it can be reopened in the future when council is taking amendments. But there is a time when the record will close for written testimony.
That is correct, and that is 5 p.m. on September 15th, so thank you for that reminder. Sorry, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is William Smith, and I'm the last member here from Untitled Studio. There are a wide range of issues being discussed in today's City Council throughout the metro area, and compared to the scale of some of these concerns, it could seem easy to write off the Green Loop as something built only for those living in the central city. But I'm here to express that the Green Loop is in fact something that should matter to all Portlanders across the metro area. We understood the Green Loop as a beginning, as a prototype to test a new way for residents to decide for themselves how the public commons in their neighborhood is developed. Already expressed by my colleagues, this brings added potential and responsibility to the project. The Green Loop could be Portland's chance to redefine and update how it does urbanism throughout all of its neighborhoods. People in all parts of Portland are starting to get tired of the old methods of public engagement, and we all know that we need to find new approaches. We need to find a new model where residents have ownership over their local commons. That is why with our Assembling a Mosaic exhibition with Design Week Portland, we pushed so hard to share an open framework approach to urbanism where engaged residents are given the power to develop their public spaces as they see fit. This would be a model that could be replicated by different communities throughout Portland. This means a unified public work reflecting the localized needs of many communities all run directly by Portland residents. That's what the Green Loop could be. It's our once-in-a-generation opportunity to actually try something truly new. It's about far more than just the central city. It's about how Portland as a whole can grow. In coming years, Portland will have to add more alternative transit infrastructure throughout the metro area through both new and old established neighborhoods. The Green Loop then is our chance right now to test how to do this appropriately in a way that not only allows communities to survive, but helps them to truly thrive. I am strongly for the creation of the Portland Green Loop, but only if it is truly used to push the boundaries of how Portland enables its residents to have ownership over the growth of their communities, both in the central city and throughout the metro area. The Portland Green Loop will set a precedent for decades to come, for better or for worse, so let's make sure that it's one we can believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Commissioners, my name is Randy Gregg, and I conceived and oversaw the Design Week Portland's international design competition for the Green Loop. We had over 50 entries from 4 continents for this, and the idea captured the country's imagination of designers. $55,000 of investment leveraged $400,000 in in-kind services for an exhibition on the loop that drew more than 3,000 people. People love this project. All of this talent and enthusiasm represents an opportunity of a generation to create a powerful new place in the city, but also a powerful new image of Portland. Great cities survive over the decades and the centuries through booms of growth and depressions and profound social change and even wars through the enduring power of their public spaces and the perception of a city they create. Part of that is a ground game of trees and paths and benches and fountains and such, but part of that is kind of an air game of simple, easily recognizable acts of major placemaking that are visible from a hilltop or on a map. Barcelona's Las Ramblas, Jerusalem's Ben Yehuda Boulevard, Boston's Emerald Necklace. The dominant image of Portland on a map was drawn by Robert Moses in the mid-40s, the I-5 and I-405 loop. The Green Loop could change that dramatically. Untitled Studio took a concept of the Green Loop and gave us a strategy for how we can come together as a community and make that image together over time. It begins as a loop in the central city, but it can easily expand into an outward web that will knit us all firmly together. There is a campaign afoot to stop all investment in the Green Loop until, quote, advancing similar investments driven by frontline communities and areas of the greatest need. I wholeheartedly agree with the second part of that statement. But public investment is really about the leverage of public good, but also about the further private investment for that public good. The entire city is going to see unparalleled growth. Let's use public policy and investment to leverage our ground and air game so we can connect the entire city by building the Green Loop into a green web. Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Steve Bazone. Expanding urban freeways has never solved traffic congestion. I'm a small business owner, and I sat on the I-5 Rose Quarter Project Stakeholders Committee back in 2012 and have closely followed the project since. I drive, bike, take transit, and walk along the I-5 corridor daily. I breathe the polluted air along with my neighbors, and I sit in the same traffic. I participate in the public engagement process for the project, the I-5 Rose Quarter Expansion Project, every step of the way. I'm here to tell you the process was abysmal. The local community surrounding the project area was not well represented and mostly ignored. Albina's Black community, who bore the brunt of the negative effects of I-5 bulldozing through their neighborhood, vaporizing 1% of the city's housing stock, were curiously not at the table. Freight companies, industry, and developers dominated every meeting. When I tried to build relationships with ODOT staffers at design charrettes and asked for their business cards, they laughed at me. I joined with the Elliott and Irvington neighborhoods to vote no on the project. This was purely a highway expansion project from the start. ODOT knew what they were doing. They kicked things off by proposing huge flying diamond interchanges and giant off-ramps. Really scary stuff. PBOT was in the room, but ODOT was in the driver's seat. Alternative proposals submitted that did not include freeway widening were quickly swept into ODOT's recycle bin and deemed out of scope. The effect is that we are supposed to be relieved ODOT didn't bulldoze half of the Lloyd district. Including assurances of basic surface improvements alongside the freeway widening was simply an effort to sugarcoat the highway project for skeptical Portlanders. It is a myth that we cannot improve the surface conditions without the highway portions. We do not have to accept freeway expansions in the urban core as the ticket to surface improvements. There are no guarantees the surface improvements will be funded or delivered. Try tolling first. Focus on where the real safety problems are. Expanding highways does not improve congestion. We know these things now. For our children's sake, I hope we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. I urge City Council to support the requests made in the No More Freeways letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, all three.
Next three are Thomas Ray, Martha Sharp, and Dave Woodall, and they'll be followed by 38, 40, and 42, Ron Buell, Kerry Richter, and Rose Kowalski.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. I'm Thomas Ray, speaking on behalf of more than 500 residents at the American Plaza Towers condominiums at Southwest First Avenue in Lincoln in the South Auditorium neighborhood. The Halpern Open Sequence defines our 50-year-old neighborhood and challenges us to extend its legacy. American Plaza, the southern anchor of the Halpern blocks, was participating in its evolution since 1970. Proposed tripling of building heights and FAR limits from 75 feet and a 2-to-1 FAR, under which we were built, it is now proposed with bonus and transfers to a maximum of 250 feet and a 6-to-1 FAR. It runs counter to the open sequence scale and concepts and exceeds right sizing needed for sensible neighborhood growth. It jeopardizes our pedestrian character, erodes the open sequence theme, violates planning policy of building height step downs to the river, threatens existing Green Boulevard streetscapes of First Avenue, Nato Parkway, and Lincoln Street, and the planned Greenway Loop. It will restrict viewpoints, sunlight, air, and space to the detriment of the neighborhood and promotes further congestion of two commuter roadways impacting pedestrian and light rail traffic. Our association letter to the City Council proposes two alternatives. I can only highlight one, and that is we propose to increase maximum height to 150 feet and increase FAR limit to 4-to-1, including bonuses and transfers from 4th Avenue east to the river and from Harrison Street south to the 405 freeway. We welcome growth, education, commercial, and residential development as we have. We seek improved services for a more complete neighborhood, and the goal is to preserve our Halpern heritage and the livability of the South Auditorium University District. Thank you, and we respectfully request consideration of these options.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your being here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am Martha Sharp, also representing the 500-plus residents of American Plaza Tower condominiums. Tripling the building height to 250 feet and FAR to a ratio of 6-to-1 in the University District South downtown is not compatible with Portland-style living. Currently, Portland enjoys national prominence for its balance of blending people, nature, and urban development in its Halpern open space sequence. American Plaza was built at its south end as part of an urban oasis on a plaza podium design using a 2-to-1 FAR. This green vision was revolutionary, merging development within a hardscape that mimicked the river valleys beyond, complete with waterfalls, mountain paths, shade, sculpture gardens, and serenity. Importantly, towers and people were given space to breathe. In stark contrast, Portland could become like any other American city with monolithic blocks and deep canyons flanked by tall towers. Portland cannot afford to turn the historic South downtown into another anonymous city. The lessons from landscape architect Lawrence Halpern must be heeded, as he stated, "It isn't nature I'm after, it's humanity in nature, in culture, related all together." The proposed tripling of building height is as much as 250 feet, and a 6-to-1 FAR aims to undo this ethic of Portland's civic pride. It is our wish that you take this into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mayor, councilors, good afternoon. My name is Dave Woodall. I'm also one of the 500 residents of American Plaza Towers Condominium Association, and I represent the board here today. I want to thank you for hearing our testimony and for extending this session. Really appreciate that. I've been a Portland resident since 2012, and I moved to the city because of its reputation for progressive sustainability and livability. It provided a really welcoming alternative to other West Coast cities. In my former home, I served on 3 comp plan citizen committees. And while that doesn't necessarily make me a planning expert, well, it doesn't make me a planning expert, I've seen the tremendous amount of work that goes into crafting a comp plan that has to coordinate policy across many disciplines. And I appreciate your careful consideration of the revisions that may not reflect that same type of careful coordination today. American Plaza has been tied to Portland's urban renewal legacy for almost 50 years. We're eager and willing to work with the Design and Review Commission to maintain this legacy, but we also recognize the need to accommodate growth. We support responsible growth through the enhancement of neighborhood livability. So we're surprised to see a tripling of current allowances for height and FAR in the South Auditorium District. Of course, it's home to the world-renowned Halpern Open Space Sequence and the last 2 designated upland viewpoints in the Central City. Central City 2035 prioritizes the protection of these quickly evaporating resources through the application of responsible and compatible maximum building heights and FARs. Such actions preserve our spectacular vistas. They ensure one-of-a-kind open spaces remain filled with sunlight and breeze. They support responsible growth, and they enhance our legacy of fostering a unique bond between people, nature, and urban spaces. Tripling building height and FAR in the South Auditorium District is at odds with our legacy, as well as the goals of Central City 2035. We support the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability's originally recommended increases to maximum building height and a 4-to-1 FAR as a responsible compromise, aligned with the vision we all share for Portland as one of the world's most livable cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, my understanding is that the staff presentation on item 1000 is only about 5 minutes, and we only have 1 person currently signed up. Do you mind if we continue this testimony until 5 p.m. and then take a brief compassion break and then come back for 1000 at 5? Will that be accepted? Very good. Okay, so that's what we'll do. Next 3, please.
Are Ron Buell, Carrie Richter, and we'll go with Suzanne Crowhurst Leonard. And they'll be followed by Susan Bliss, Bill Failing, and Lincoln Tuchow, 44, 45, and 46.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Buell, for 50 years a Portlander, and urban freeway expansion has never solved congestion. I was at the hearings in Salem for the transportation package, HB 2017. It was sold as congestion relief in those hearings. And in my mind, that's a joke. One can look at the 50 million widening from 2 lanes to 3 at Victory Boulevard on I-5. Travel times in that stretch of highway have done nothing but go up since the widening. Or one can look at the widening from 2 lanes to 3 of the Sunset Freeway 26 from 185th to Sylvan. Travel times on 26 have done nothing but go up since that widening. Even PBOT, who would certainly love to have this alleged $453 million from the state for this project, won't claim that recurring congestion on this stretch of I-5 will be reduced by this widening. They won't claim it. They didn't before the Planning Commission. And the money hasn't been allocated for this project. TriMet hopes to package new taxes for Portlanders with TriMet's Southwest Light Rail Corridor measure in 2018, which would pay for this measure. Look, I support congestion pricing on all 6 of the freeways in our area, and we should insist that we want to see the results of congestion pricing before we expand any freeways, including this project. But that's not enough. This city council needs to develop some transportation backbone. Don Hamilton of ODOT said in the Portland Mercury that you were going to do what ODOT told you to do. And we just heard from the ODOT gentleman saying, gee, you can't transfer this money to something else. So I don't have a time to read you my list of 6 other projects I think you should transfer this money to, but they're there. And I'm telling you, when we transferred the money from the Mount Hood Freeway to the light rail system, and we started the 50 miles of light rail that we have in this city. I was there. I was part of that consideration. And the city council and the mayor, Neil Goldschmidt, did not have a low-level bureaucrat from ODOT tell them that what they could or couldn't do with that money. They went to work to fight for it, and we got it done. And we didn't build that freeway, and we started 50 miles of light rail. And frankly, I think that you get some guts, have some backbone, say, we don't want this project, but we've got some things we'd love to spend this money on, safety things and the protected bikeways on state highways. I could go on. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners. My name is Carrie Richter. I'm an attorney at the law firm Bateman Seidel. I'm testifying this afternoon on behalf of Conda LLC and David Lyken. They are the owners of the Roseland Theater Building located at 8 to 10 Northwest 6th Avenue. This property is located outside the new Chinatown, Japantown Historic District. It is 6 blocks of encumbered property that is adjacent to the historic district and directly north of West Burnside. Yet the Planning and Sustainability Commission recommended reducing the total building height for my client's property from 260 to 250 feet. The council should reject the PSC recommendation and retain the existing height limits for a number of reasons. First, it will severely interfere with the existing redevelopment opportunities for this property. At the existing 460-foot height limit, Mr. Lyken could potentially save the existing Roseland Theater, transfer the FAR from the historic building to the remaining quarter block, and build a pencil tower on the remainder parcel, and potentially join with the adjacent owner, David Gold, to realize the lost returns from retaining the 3-story historic Roseland Theater. Cutting the potential building height to nearly half of what it is today will so severely impact the development expectations as to require maximizing development potential and potentially losing the Roseland. I've submitted a letter into the record, but I would point out that there are a number of the city's central city plan goals that call for supporting tourism in this area, and the Roseland plays a key component. Second of all, the property is ideally suited for accommodating more intense development. It is outside a historic district. It is not in a view corridor area. The MAX train runs along Northwest 6th Avenue, abutting this property to the west, and it abuts West Burnside with the convergence of bus service. It's hard to imagine a more transit-friendly location. This site is across the street from the U.S. Bank building, which is 42 stories and 536 feet tall. A tall tower in this area would be entirely compatible. For these reasons, we ask that you reject the PSC's proposal to reduce height on the Roseland block and retain the existing 600-foot height limit. And I apologize for my little friend.
No worries. Commissioner Fritz.
I have a question. The conventional wisdom would be that having more height would be more likely to get a demolishing and start over. So what's the reason that you think it'll preserve the existing structure rather than
The Roseland
not?
Theater is a designated historic resource. And the idea is you have a designated historic resource on a quarter block, and that leaves 3/4 of the block of non-contributing structure and parking lot. And the ability to maximize the growth there would be to save the Roseland, which Mr. Lyken has the intent of doing.
And is it possible for a property owner to just get rid of the historic designation?
Sure, there is. There's demolition review.
Yeah.
So yes, it's possible, but it's hard for me to understand why this height reduction is proposed in this 6-block area,
Okay.
because it isn't a view corridor, is not adjacent to a historic district, and is.
Can't imagine why you can't think of what you wanted to say.
Carrie, could you,
You've been very patient, young man. Thank you very much.
I was making notes as you spoke, but just tell us again, the proposal is to reduce it from what to what again?
It's from 460 to 250.
Okay.
We'll look into it, thank you.
And the other thing I should point out is that this property doesn't carry with it the transfer of development rights as it does in historic districts. In the historic district, these folks can transfer their development rights, but these 6 properties were left out. And I think that was a mistake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
But
patience.
I have a question.
Let's go outside and you can tell me the question.
Oh, wise mum. Thank you very much for your patience, young man.
That's a hard act to follow. Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners Udali, Fritz, and Fish. I'm Suzanne Cohus-Lenard, co-founder and director of the International Making Cities Livable Conferences, but I'm here to read a testimony from Michael Mahaffey, who is executive director of Sustasis Foundation, who's out of the country speaking at a conference on urban planning. I previously testified, he says, about cautionary research into the impacts of tall buildings and the dangers of what I called voodoo urbanism. That is, over-concentrating attention on the expensive cores of cities and neglecting the capacities of their many other neighborhoods to grow in a more benign way. As we see in so many other cities on the West Coast and elsewhere, the result too often is even more runaway loss of affordability, livability, and heritage, displacement, over-gentrification, homelessness, and other serious urban ills. I do believe the Central City Plan has significant defects in this respect. However, my focus in this letter is on the failure of the plan to comply with statewide Planning Goal 1. I believe the Council is well aware of the potential conflicts of interest identified by the City Auditor's Office, requiring the remedy that members of the West Quadrant Stakeholder Committee must file conflict of interest disclosure forms after the fact. 5 members refused to do so, 2 of whom appeared to benefit financially from the increased heights that will go forward under the current plan. I believe it is therefore urgent that we restore the integrity of the planning process in perception and in reality. I believe this will require at a minimum a reconvening of a new stakeholder committee charged with reassessing the heights and FARs of the West Quadrant, comprising a, quote, broadly representative cross-section of affected citizens, as Goal 1 requires. I suspect they will be convinced on the evidence that building heights of no more than 100 feet will be fully adequate to accommodate a more benign, diverse, diffuse form of urban growth and so preserve Portland's priceless livability and heritage.
Thank you.
The next 3 are Susan Bliss, Bill Failing, and Lincoln Tuchow. And they'll be followed by 47, 48, and 49, Tracy Prince, Liz Cooksey, and Eric Mason.
Good afternoon.
Hello, thank you. My name is Susan Bliss. I moved to the West End 11 years ago because of its convenience and pleasant livability. But aspects of the plan on the table appear to threaten our neighborhood by inviting massive development at odds with its character. The issue is building height. Allowing structures 200 and 300 feet and higher in this area, now largely made up of residential units and low-rise small businesses, will drastically change our neighborhood and, by precedent, Portland overall. Expanded height limits will give developers the incentive they need to uproot trees, demolish many historic structures, and replace them with look-alike glass towers. Rehabilitation and expansion on a human scale is preferable to demolition, but if the city raises height limits in our downtown neighborhood, there is little hope for saving the current building stock. Not only do our older buildings give variety and texture to the urban scene, but many are also home to neighbors who cannot pay the awesome cost of high-rise living. Most sustainable and affordable is the structure that exists, not the tower that replaces an historic building after it has been demolished. According to Gerald Mildner of PSU, a building higher than 5 stories requires rent some 2.5 times the rents from garden apartment developments. A major changeover to residential towers will put more Portland citizens at a loss for homes and add to our already burgeoning homeless population. In order to curb the raising of historic buildings and affordable housing units and to preserve the character of our neighborhood, please consider limiting West End building heights to 100 feet. I also wanted to say that I support the amendments announced by Mayor Wheeler to preserve site corridors from Salmon Springs and Japanese Garden, as well as Commissioner Fritz's call for changes in height restrictions at the river level. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
How's that for a segue, going from bliss to failing?
That's good material, Bill. That's good.
I want to thank the commission today, first of all, for giving us the opportunity to express ourselves, and also I really appreciated the eloquence of those who have testified today and the passion for which they have. And so it's been very rewarding afternoon, and thanks for extending the time a little bit, because I'm glad you're going to have a chance to hear Tracy Prince, who's got a dynamite presentation.
Time.
I'm really here today to just address I think the potential threat to the view corridors, and I really want to speak up about that. I think that planning, with its best intentions, is letting some of the soul of the city slip away. In particular, the corridors that I think matter the most to many of us is keeping the Jefferson Street view of the Vista Bridge as you come down Jefferson. It's one of the most iconic bridges in the Pacific Northwest, maybe, and it's being threatened. And right now, there's a developer who is convinced that the corridor should be moved a little bit over to the left, and it doesn't work, and we need to take a close look at that. Mount Hood. Connecting Mount Hood to Portland, it goes back to the very earliest days here. I was looking through some old records. I'm going to not be out of time here, I hope. But just a couple of lines from a letter from one of my ancestors describing to East relatives Portland as it was in 1863. The town itself looks as though it was dropped into a valley, the horizon being girded with a continuous belt of fir trees. The only peep of the outside world is Mount Hood, which looks up grandly beyond our fir ramparts, even then. So I say that we really need to pay attention to the viewpoints of the Mount Hood, the corridors that take the eyes to Mount Hood. One other point is when I drive up Vista Avenue, the name of the renowned Olmsted Brothers, named by the renowned Olmsted Brothers for its panoramic view of the city and of Mount Hood, I wonder today why it's still called Vista Avenue. It's impossible to see Mount Hood from there. So Mount Hood belongs to the entire city. I think that the view corridors are being manipulated to accommodate developers. Current views of this proposed draft are compromised. Also, please support the proposed changes to Salmon Springs to keep Mount Hood visible to all, as our mayor said earlier. Remember, once a view is lost, it's lost forever. Thank you,
sir.
Mayor, may I make just one comment?
Commissioner Fish.
And we do have time for Tracy, so I'm not cutting into your time. I have a comment to make about Bill that has nothing to do with his testimony. But I was channeling Bill Failing today because this morning I attended a press conference where Restore Oregon officially announced that the Jantzen Beach carousel had not only been found and saved, but it had been donated to Restore Oregon.
Right.
And now our beloved carousel is in the hands of a custodian that wants to be a good steward. And the challenge will be for our community to determine where we want to site it permanently and to enter into a fundraising campaign because it's going to need a structure to protect it from the elements. It turns out it is of the 5,000 to 6,000 historic wood carousels built during the Golden Age, there are only 150 left. And this is
1906 World's Fair in St. Louis, Nick.
Right, and this one is arguably the greatest living example of that great tradition. And the reason I say I was channeling Bill Failing is that the last time we had a similar challenge was when the city that owns 3 steam locomotives did not have a home for those locomotives because they were evicted by a railroad tenant, landlord. And Bill Failing and Mike Lindbergh and a host of wonderful citizens got together. And through their efforts, we now have a new museum next to OMSI, which is home to our 3 steam locomotives. And I hope the city can summon the same spirit to create a new home for the Jantzen Beach Carousel.
Thanks, Nick. You had a lot to do with the Rail Museum also.
So thank you, Bill.
Very good, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
My name is Lincoln Tusho, and I'm a member of the Advocacy Committee for the Architectural Heritage Center. I'm also a broker with Urban Nest Realty. I would like to propose the following amendments to the 2035 Central City Plan. One is to reduce the building heights to 100 feet throughout the west end along both sides of the South Park blocks and in Goose Hollow. And 2, to lower the floor to area ratio back to the original 6:1 from the 8:1 or 9:1 that's been in the latest draft. Why reduce the maximum building height to 100 feet and the FAR to 7:1? There are several benefits to this proposal, but I want to focus on just one, and this being it will preserve low and middle income housing in the neighborhood. The West End has a plethora of medium-rise vintage apartments, buildings that are not only architecturally beautiful, but affordable. I went on Craigslist just the other day to do a little experiment and compared rental prices between the older character buildings and the new high-rises in the West End and other downtown neighborhoods. And you know what? The difference is dramatic. Rents in the old buildings range from $800 to up to, say, $1,400 for studios and one-bedroom apartments. The prices in the new construction, the tall glass towers, tended to be much higher, often well over $2,000 a month, and going much higher than that. If the current max heights of the CC 2035 are kept in place, there will be tremendous market pressure to demolish these vintage buildings, and we will lose some of the best affordable housing stock in downtown Portland. This proposal also supports the goal of the draft of preserving housing diversity and no net loss. The City Council, you folks have made very impressive efforts recently to address the affordability crisis, and I applaud you for that. And this way, we can continue that. The character and historic flavor of the neighborhood will be preserved and affordable housing can be provided. It's a win-win. Remember, the greenest and most affordable building is often the one that is already built. We can accomplish 2 great Portland goals with a single policy decision, and I hope you will implement this proposal. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Why don't you do 3 more, and then let's do 3 more.
Okay. The next 3 are Tracy Prince, Liz Cooksey, and Eric Mason.
I'd like to answer the question that Commissioner Fritz had about the map.
Just put your name in the record, please.
What's that? Oh, Tracy Prince. That I believe the Northwest Examiner did a map of properties of conflicted SAC members, but I don't think it was complete.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Tracy Prince, a board member of the Architectural Heritage Center, vice president of the Goose Hollow Foothills League, which is the neighborhood association. We're very proud of the fact that half of our board is low income and half are renters. We're presenting the unanimous GHFL position. In the past decade, we've seen that the more Goose Hollow fights for what's best for all residents in ways that cost developers millions of dollars, the more vicious the personal attacks. I was defamed this week on social media. I have a 105-year-old house that I bought 15 years ago, and like most of my neighbors, I could not afford to live in my neighborhood today. I have a view of Mount Hood, but none of the proposed heights will affect my view of Mount Hood. A couple of buildings might block my view of the Lincoln High School football field. Our board members aren't fighting for personal gain. We're fighting for every Portlander who hasn't had time for 3 years of reading thousands of pages of code every 6 months in order to understand how much the views are being privatized and how much ethically conflicted developers are being enriched in the Central City 2035 plan. On the views. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for fighting to keep the views from being privatized only for the wealthy at Salmon Springs Fountain, and for saving the views, or trying to save the views at Japanese Garden. We encourage all commissioners to vote for his amendments. It will only take lowering heights on a few properties to save the Salmon Springs Fountain view, the last view of Mount Hood from the edge of the Willamette River, and only vegetation management to save Japanese Garden views. It's important for Portland to promote egalitarian access to public views. Please refer to the first image in our handout. We emailed a 13-page letter with complex code request. Today, we just want you to look at photos. This is what views of the Vista Bridge will be like with the proposed heights. We're asking to return Southwest Jefferson to today's protected view corridor from I-405 to the bridge, and lower heights along Southwest Jefferson to save views of the Vista Bridge. If heights are built as proposed, Portlanders will only be able to see the arch of the bridge by standing underneath it in the middle of the street. Heights are increased near the bridge will privatize views of the arch of the bridge only for those wealthy enough to live in a building blocking the view. The new SW72 viewpoint from Collins Circle, which is the second image I've given you, is a ridiculous so-called viewpoint of only 1/2 of the arch while standing on the far edge of Collins Circle. BPS staff created this so-called viewpoint to allow them to raise the heights near the bridge. A staff member stated very clearly in a planning and sustainability work session that creating this so-called viewpoint was done to benefit one developer who owns property near the bridge and wanted heights raised. I'll let my colleague finish.
My name is Elizabeth Cooksey, and I'm also in the Goose Hollow Foothills League, and I'm here to ensure that Tracy's dynamite presentation isn't cut short. We believe the city shouldn't be doing business this way. As you can see in image 2, this supposedly protected view protects nothing, since the red box showing the protected area is in the middle of the street where no one will ever build anything. City Council already agreed to protect the view of the Vista Bridge when you adopted the West Quadrant Plan, one of its 5 urban design policies specifically named the Vista Bridge and committed to elevate the presence, character, and role of this significant public view corridor, which defines the district. And it commits to stepping heights down to the neighborhoods on the west. The proposed heights at the first image clearly don't step down to Goose Hollow. Policy 5.4 of this draft commits to preserving views of the Vista Bridge. Policy 5.7 commits to preserving gateways, yet this magnificent gateway will be blocked by tall buildings. Please keep today's view corridor and require lower heights for 4 blocks near the bridge. On image number 3, you will see the current view of Mount Hood from the Vista Bridge and what it will be with the heights proposed in this draft. This is view SW15. We are asking you to lower heights only slightly, 4 floors on approximately 8 properties, to protect current views from the Vista Bridge of the low slopes of Mount Hood. It won't take much to save today's view. The beautiful contrast between the low slopes and the snow cap is what makes this view startling and what defines Portland. This view was used as the title shot for Portlandia, and thousands of tourists visit weekly. In the top photo, this view is being used as the backdrop by West Sylvan Middle School's morning show. This vista is important to Portland's sense of place. And now the beep is asking me to turn it over to Eric.
Eric Simon, Goose Hollow. On all views, it is shocking to see that the ESSE, the Economic, Social, Environmental, and Energy Analysis, developed by BPS staff, has no metric to measure views that are so iconic that they've appeared on Portland postcards and promotional materials for over a century. In their ESSE analysis, private profits for developers will always be weighted more than the public good of egalitarian access to views. We recommend adding this paragraph to the ESSE. Many views are iconic to Portland's sense of place, so much so that their value to Portland's identity, history, and the massive economic boost of tourism must outweigh any other consideration. These views must be protected, and their cultural, historic, and economic impact far outweighs any other metric. This includes views of downtown and Mount Hood from the Rose Garden and Japanese Garden, scenic corridors to and from the Vista Bridge, which Portland has protected for almost a century, and views of Mount Hood from Salmon Springs Fountain. On image number 4, you will see historic and contemporary photos showing how much views from the Rose Garden define our city. Rose Garden photos are frequently used by Travel Portland to promote tourism and conventions, which are a substantial part of Portland's economy. We're asking to add the downtown skyline as a focal point to Rose Garden views SW03 and 09. On SW 10 and 12, the Garden Store and Zoo Train, the skyline is a focal point, but is listed as allow, which means no vegetation management. Please list all Rose Garden views as prohibit. This will allow for more rigorous vegetation management to keep century-old views that define our city. It's very easy to save these views. We're not asking for much. On image number 5, you'll see 9 historic buildings in Goose Hollow that we're trying to protect. They're either listed on the National Register or on the Historic Resources Inventory. Please provide several provide affordable housing and some of the cheapest market rate rents per square foot in our neighborhood. We ask for you to lower the current heights on the 9 historic buildings along and near Southwest Morrison that are threatened with incentivized demolitions by 320-foot heights. Please lower heights to 125 feet. We also support the West End's efforts to save over 100 historic buildings by lowering heights and reducing FAR. As reported in the NW Examiner, the Ombudsman found that West Quadrant Stakeholder Advisory Committee members, public officials, were unethical. They voted to give themselves millions of dollars by increasing heights on their own properties. The Ombudsman required SAC members to disclose their financial interests. They did not. They simply said, "We own many properties in this area." We encourage City Council to ask the Ombudsman if she is satisfied with their response and to rescind all heights given to these developers in this ethically compromised process. We don't think Portland should be doing business this way. We support Commissioner Fritz's amendments to reduce heights at the bridgehead, but we believe that many other heights were obtained in ethically compromised ways and should be rescinded. Thank you.
Tracy, I have one question. On the page 5, where you have the historic properties, I'm going to have to go back and do some homework, but you know, like let's take the Brano, which is the top left. That was part of the city's 11 by 13 campaign, I think, and I'll have to go back and check. I think we slapped a 60-year covenant of affordability. There was a lot of federal, state, and local money. So it may be that on a building like that, we've already got protections in place that, regardless of the zoning. I think your concern is any building that doesn't have some covenant or some protection from the city where we're essentially creating an incentive to demolish?
Yes, and we know that, building affordable housing that's owned by the city, they're not going to demolish that building.
Well, in this case, we
there's a
partnered
covenant,
with
right.
REACH, I guess.
But for several decades, the heights have been too high. We've been trying to claw them back for a long time because if we're relying on, so we have a few that are protected by covenant like that, they're protected for 60 years. But if we're relying on the goodwill of people to not demolish a building, apply, if it's on a National Register listing or that sort of thing, to apply to have it delisted for 325 feet, I feel like the financial incentive is way too pressing, and so that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. Obviously, we're not getting to everybody who would like to testify today. I think we have about 60 more people who have signed up. So I want to remind people that the written record will remain open until September 15th at 5 p.m. if people would prefer just to submit their testimony by email if they did not get a chance to testify today. And there will be other opportunities, as was stated at the beginning of the hearing, for people to testify in person. I apologize that we did not get to that. I would like BPS staff to come up for just one moment, if I could have you come up. I have a list of questions that I will just quickly read into the record that I would like a response to by our October 18th session. First of all, what within the and I'll give, you don't have to write this down. Okay. What within the Central City 2035 helps owners acquire the additional FAR needed to ensure the affordable housing and seismic improvements are achieved beyond the base zoning requirements? Number two, given the multimodal mixed-use area designation within the Central City 2035 plan, doesn't that address past barriers with ODOT due to additional trip generation? Number three, what's the amount of FAR that's available for transfer in each sub-district? Number four, what's the need for FAR in each sub-district looking at likely redevelopment sites over the next 20 years? I'd like to see both of these pieces of data by our October 18th session. My sense is that requiring a transfer seems unnecessary and just adds to the uncertainty and the length of time that it takes to get projects going. And lastly, what is the problem, if any, of simply allowing a project to build to its allowed height once it meets our affordable housing and seismic upgrade standards for the first 3-to-1 FAR? So I'll give you this later. You don't have to write it down. It's probably not fun to write down, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on those. Colleagues, any further issues or questions? Commissioner Fritz.
So I have 14 questions. I won't read them into the record. But the main one that I'd like some input, as much information as we can, both from the Northwest Examiner and from the Ombudsman's report about which particular properties may have a conflict of interest that we should be reconsidering. That's one of the things I'd like before we start addressing that issue. Thank you. I'll get you the rest in writing.
Great. And just to reiterate what Commissioner Fish said, we have 4 hearings here. We have the written record open, and this is really the opportunity for the public to chime in on specific projects, specific lots, specific FAR zoning issues. So this is really our time, regardless of the conflict, and I'm compelled by the Ombudsman's commentary on that. And I agree with Commissioner Fish, we need to tighten up the expectations and the rules with regard to boards and commissions. But this is really the time now for people to testify on these issues and give us their own perceptions. And I heard a lot of people talking about 100 feet or different issues on that. But certainly, yeah, please, Commissioner Fritz.
Certainly, in-person testimony makes a huge difference, and I know that not everybody can be at a meeting during the day. And so while we do look at your written records, if you can send photographs or any kind of maps or anything that kind of gives us a little more context, that would be very helpful. As I mentioned to Aaron Brown, it's not helpful to send me 200 emails all saying the same thing. It makes it harder then for me to find the individual emails that say something different. So to the extent that if people want to do petitions, that they could tell me that there's 375 names and send me the names, that'd be lovely, but don't send me all those individual emails. It really is counterproductive. Thank you.
Great. So once again, the record for written testimony is open till Friday, September 15th at 5 p.m. This will allow people to augment their testimony based on what they've heard at the hearing. The first work session will be on October 18th at 2 p.m. We'll now shift to the, sorry,
before you shift, the hearing is it continued till next week so that the remainder of the list can testify?
Yes, so
Okay.
the hearing is continued until next week so that those who have not testified will have the opportunity so to do. Thank you, legal counsel, for reminding me of that. Next item, please,
Thank you.
Carla.
Item 1,000, amend the Central City Plan District to increase height and floor area ratio limits on the United States Postal Service site.
Colleagues, this amendment will allow Prosper Portland to move forward with early implementation of the redevelopment plan for the United States Postal Service site, one of the most significant redevelopment sites in Portland's Central City, consistent with the Central City 2035 plan and the 2015 Broadway Corridor Framework Plan. This project will bring approximately 700 units of affordable housing, a high-density mix of employment, new city attractions, including expansion of the park blocks, and signature connections between the Pearl District and Old Town Chinatown, and between North Park blocks and the Broadway Bridge. I'll now turn it over to Rachel and Sarah.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Hoy with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And thank you very much, Commissioners. Just a short introduction to this ordinance. These amendments increase the maximum floor area ratio and building heights on the United States Postal Service site in the Pearl District of the Central City. This is consistent with the recommended maximums that are in the recommended draft for the Central City plan. So the slide that you have here before you, I just wanted to be clear about what this ordinance includes. The increase for maximum floor area, what it is today it's 4 to 1. The increase would be to 7 to 1. And then the maximum building height, currently the height is 75 feet on the property. This would increase the height from 75 to 250 south of Johnson and increase north of Johnson to 400 feet. So these, again, I will say that these are FAR and height limits that are a part of the Central City 2035 plan, have been discussed as part of that process, as well as prior to that, there were discussions on increased FAR and height through the Broadway Corridor Framework Plan. And what this allows, the request for early implementation of these height and FAR increases, is to put these allowances in place early to allow development plans for the USPS site to move forward. And that's what I have. I do have my colleague from Prosper Portland, Sarah Harpole, here, if there are other questions that you may have for us.
Not yet. Good. Do we have any invited testimony?
No, we do not.
Are there any other elected officials or members of city commissions who'd like to speak first? Carla, call up how many people do we have signed up? Just one?
One
Very
person,
good.
John Hollister.
Very good. Welcome, sir. Thank you for your patience. Sure.
For the record, my name is John Hollister. So since this is a separate deal and it's not with that other one, does this get back to the 3-minute deal or the 5-minute deal or the 10-minute deal?
We'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay, all right, okay.
But let's try.
Okay, all right.
I don't think we're all up for the 10-minute deal.
Okay, all right, okay, all right. Well, you might be, because that's going to get really good for you.
All right,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, we'll see, we'll see. So I believe that this particular development should be the most iconic, innovative development ever built in Portland. And actually, for Commissioner Fish, maybe this will be wherever the home of the carousel will go, somewhere in that. And you can name it after him. It's the, and I actually believe there should be no height limit. I just named something after you, Nick. Yeah.
Carousel, you got the carousel. I'm
Yeah,
jealous.
you got the carousel. You got the carousel, and it's going to
Just
be,
gave
it's going to
you
be
the
in the post
carousel, Nick.
office. It's going to be there you go.
That and $6 million will make it happen, so thank
There you go. Exactly. There should be no height limit. There should be no limit to anything on this thing to make this be the signature event in Portland. It's the biggest area that we have in the central city to develop, and there should be no restrictions on anything. Have it be the most magnificent thing. And if it ends up being bigger than Big Pink, it is. And you know from my other testimony, I am really very conscious on height limits and really want to respect those. But then there are also times we get to figure out where the growth is going to be. And this is just going to be the most signature thing. And actually for this, since we're naming things after people, I actually believe that this one should be named after you, Mayor Wheeler. And
He's already got a town.
no, he's going to get he's going to get more. He's going to get more.
And a bunch of parking garages.
Yeah, yeah.
Please, let's spread, in the name of equity, let's spread the wealth around.
Let's shift those out, because what I really truly believe
I'm
that,
glad I didn't commit to the 10-minute plan.
because this site, on or before this is going to be completed, I believe that you are going to go down in record of being one of, if not the best mayor of Portland ever.
Please continue. 10 minutes it is.
Yeah. The 10-minute plan is now back, has been reenacted. I believe this because, and I'm not saying this so much to make you feel good about yourself, I'm doing this so Portland people can know. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I don't know about Wheeler, I don't know about Wheeler, what's going on?
That was a private conversation, and I want to strike that from the record.
Yeah. And he's going too slow on things, but that's not true at all. When you have a huge remodel project going on and you get in there and you find out that the foundation is cracked, the plumbing sucks, and the wiring needs to be redone, you can't see a lot of change on the outside without doing a lot of things on the internal side. I think you've done tremendous changes on some of the internal structures, and you've dealt with some bureaus that need to be dealt with, and I think you're doing a fantastic job. I think that there are many people here, and once again, I'm always going to be quoting this young author. There are many people in Portland that are in the category of what we call audience number one. And this audience number one includes a vast majority of people who are fed up with government and are looking for fresh approaches to society's complex problems. And I recommend everyone, the vast audience that is left, go out and get a book, which I have absolutely been fascinated with. And it was written by this young author in 1993 called Governments That Work, Innovation in State and Local Government. And it was by a gentleman named Edward T. Wheeler. And I think this is an amazing book that someone would be able to craft at the age of 31. And I am, my wife thinks I have a man crush on you. I don't think that's really, I think that's just a little inappropriate.
For your time now.
Yeah. But it's but I am very excited to be part of this historic thing and to see you go. And I know you're going to prove me accurate. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anybody would like a copy of the book, they're for sale on Amazon. I think last I checked for 6 cents. So it's a bargain. It's a bargain.
Yeah. This one actually it says it on the cover page. No longer property of the Denver Public Library. Yeah, so
I even got kicked out in Denver.
So I got a used copy. So they've even got rid of it. So
I just think it's remarkable. They went through the effort to make sure everybody knew that they had nothing to do with it anymore.
Wanted to prove it's not nicked.
Well, there you go. So and is that it? Do we have anybody else? I'm afraid to ask. Anybody else who wants to testify? Good. So the record will be left open for written testimony until Friday, September 15th at 5 p.m. This will allow for people to augment their testimony based on what they've heard at the meeting. The next council session on this item, unless I'm corrected, will be on September 28th at 3 p.m.
Yes, that is true. And if council, that could be second reading and council can vote on that time. At that
Very
date,
good.
Unless there are amendments.
No, I'm trying
Very
to
good.
get
Commissioner Fritz.
I'm just really concerned, as Mr. Hollis has said, in all seriousness, this should be an iconic development, and to have only one person testifying about it, I'm just wondering, I can't believe that nobody else has any concerns or anything that they'd like to add or amend. So I'm just wondering, how confident are we that everybody thinks this is absolutely fantastic? Or did people prioritize testifying on the Central City Plan, which is for a 20-some-year period? Comments, please.
I think, so the one thing I would add is that this was an amendment to move forward early with these heightened FARs, but this is still in the Central City Plan. So the opportunity to testify has also been a part of that process today. We did not, we've always been including these heightened FARs in the Central City 2035 plan. This is just an opportunity or a request to move it forward more quickly than the rest of the Central City 2035 will go into effect after the comp plan.
We don't have to close it, though, at the next, there's no particular urgency in terms of shutting conversations down on this prior to the rest of the conversation, is there?
I think that if we could leave it open. I mean, I think if there are no more amendments, it could go to a second reading and a vote on the 28th, or that's
Commissioner Fritz.
that's an option.
Well, I certainly have to wade through the 203 amendments or emails that I have on the same subject to see if I do have anything on this particular topic, and I know you will do that as well. I just, since we're still on television, presumably, encourage people to look at what this is and make sure that we're heading in the right direction, because once we do this, there won't be another opportunity to have another bite at it, at least for a while, right?
I would also note, in addition to the Central City 2035 plan outreach, this was an extensive point of outreach during the Broadway Corridor Framework Plan, and we received similar sentiments as the testimony you heard before, that really this was a point to accomplish growth and extensive public benefits for our community. And so we heard, I would say, very little, if any, opposition to high-density development within this site during that outreach as well.
And do we have official positions from the Old Town Chinatown Community Association, the Pearl District, and the Goose Hollow Foothills League?
We do have letters from many of those, I'm not sure of all, but that have been submitted as testimony for the Central City 2035 process. We would have to check if there is also then, if there are any comments specifically related to this project.
Yes, so if you could help me and my staff by pulling out of the testimony that you've received anything relating to the post office site, so that I make sure I look at it carefully.
So would it be helpful, Commissioner, let me make a suggestion, rather than moving it to second, why don't we just continue it till the 28th, and then we could make a decision on the 28th?
And that's fine. But the record, are you suggesting leaving the record open until the 28th?
Why don't we
Okay.
go ahead and leave the record open on this one until the 28th?
Okay.
And we can take a look at it with fresh eyes on the 28th and either decide at that point to move it on, or if people want to put amendments on the table at that point and take testimony.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Hollister for his refreshing testimony, because the rest of the testimony today really begged the question, well, where should we put height and where should we put density? Because we can't preserve the entire city in amber. It sounds like because this was previously agreed to and all it is all we are doing is accelerating it, that maybe we're not going to hear, we've already heard the input and made the decision. But I just want to make a pitch. I'm a visual learner. It's very hard for me to read about these things without a graphic illustration, especially when there's much more kind of heated debate against height restrictions, because I'd really like to be able to see what we're talking about, not just read. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. So then we are continuing this to the 28th of September
And leaving the record open.
and leaving the record open.
Well, except that people can testify on this next week too, right?
Yeah.
They
and-
can. If the
part of the
record's
plan.
open and the hearing's continued, yes, they absolutely can.
Great, thank you.
Great. All right. So with that, everybody, thank you. John, thank you for your testimony. We are adjourned.